evening. This is Tuesday, March 18th, 7 o'clock. This is the advisory committee meeting for tonight. And first on our agenda is we've asked Don Lowe to come in and talk to us about really it's the update on Minuteman in relation to the article that's appearing on the town warrant.
All right.
So come on.
Thank you for having me. One of my favorite subjects to talk about.
It was my idea.
You know, that's a guilty conscience.
Right there, you hear it.
So I'm not sure exactly how you'd like me to proceed. I do have I don't have handouts, but I do have a sheet that does a point-by-point comparison of the major things that are changing in the agreement. I don't know if that would be helpful.
That would be helpful. I think just to, go over the agreement that, I think the changes.
Why it's so important to belong to Minuteman?
There we go, isn't it?
Sure. Well, every community needs to be able to send their students to a vocational school. Back in the 70s, Bolton, I believe, was one of the 12 original towns that ended up in the Minuteman district. And that's actually a good setup for this, because if, say, Bolton wanted to get out of the Minuteman district and, say, go to Assabet, under the current agreement, all the other 15 communities would have to vote in favor of releasing us. Under the new agreement, a majority of the communities would only have to vote to let us out. So that's one of the things right out of the gate. It's an easier path, it's an easier exit path if that's what you wish.
Well, I just wondered, why are we in it to even consider being exited out?
No,
That's my question.
It sounds like there's no out right now.
Well, we were in
Right
since,
now, I understand,
since
but why-
that decision was made
What's the
back.
other alternative? To pay as you
1970.
go?
Yeah, you would have to
Yeah,
pay as you go.
because
You would have to
when
not
we
belong
have
to any district, and then if a district was taking kids, which they don't always, they sometimes are full, sometimes there's a waiting list, then yes, you would be a non-member community, you would pay the out-of-district tuition, you wouldn't have any say at the table as far as how the budget is done, you would have no representation.
Okay, so,
But why wouldn't we just treat the same relationship as what my understanding is how we're treating the charter schools? When a kid shows up here, doesn't want this school, wants to go off to a charter school, the money on that kid's head goes to the charter school. We're not belonging to any charter school district, at least not yet.
Those are the rules of the game. I mean, this was sort of our
When a
line.
gun is constantly
what I would
held to
like,
us.
but do we know how many kids? I don't think there's anyone in the program this year.
11.
There are 11 this year?
It's actually gone up, the budget's higher for 2015 because of the additional,
Yep.
it's been 10,
Or maybe
pretty
it was
steady
last
10,
year.
right?
It's been very steady between 9 and 11 for
But
years.
it's
The
really
Assabet
not-
had, a couple of years ago, there was a kid who wanted to go to
I was
Assabet
there.
and then decided
Not
not
to
to.
go,
Right.
because they didn't offer that.
But
Assabet?
whatever,
I mean,
No, it was something that they
you know, there was some reason they wanted to go to Assabet because they wanted to do something
Yeah.
Minuteman didn't do, but then they decided not to go there.
Right,
And we have nobody at Assabet.
right.
Okay.
In fact, our 4-year rolling average for enrollment is 9.8.
So Don, on the counter of that, what are the benefits of membership?
The benefits of membership is you have a voice at the table. You have a say in both the annual budget, the operating budget, and any capital appropriations. And if you,
And so that's you sitting at the table representing.
a school committee member, now, I'm not a school committee member. Bolton has a school committee member.
But it's not a member of the Neshoba School Committee.
No, it's a separate
school
school committee, that's right.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Which is currently appointed by the town moderator.
Interesting.
And capital, if there's a capital appropriation that requires borrowing, every community currently needs to vote in favor of the borrowing for it to pass. So one town, Dover, with 2 kids in the school system, could vote down a borrowing.
Because it would cost them a lot more than it would cost anybody else, because they only have 2 kids. Now,
Now,
do
who
we have
should-
to pay to be a member, right?
Yes, we
On
do.
top of tuition?
No.
No.
Well,
No.
yeah.
No, there's no entrance fee. I mean, you're paying,
No, there's no interest fee, but don't we have, is the only thing we pay the per student fee?
yes, we get an assessment just like we do at Neshoba. And it's based on population. I mean, it's based on attendance.
So if we had no students there, we would owe nothing in that
No,
year?
there's a 5-student minimum.
to stay
So
in.
whether we or
So
not
again,
we have
a
five.
town like Dover that sends 1 or 2 kids every year still pays for 5.
Ah,
Dover often talks about their $100,000 student, because some years they have 1 person in, but they have to pay 5 tuitions.
So Dawn, parlay this to some of the difficulties we've had with the Neshoba assessment and the feeling that we have lack of say and that it's sort of forced on us and the budgets are sort of out of line with reality. Do we have the same issue with Minuteman and we just don't know it because it's such a much smaller amount because it's only 10, 11 kids? Or do you think, like, how do we know what we're being charged and their budget is being managed just as aggressively as what I think the Neshoba budget's being managed? Do we have an idea?
Well, I mean, I'm not normally at the table at the school committee meeting, so I can only speak at a higher level, but from what I've observed, it appears to me that Minuteman manages its budget pretty tightly. I mean, they've had very minimal, relatively speaking, increases over the past 5 years since I've been here. Not that they don't go up, of course they do. Although 1 year I think was pretty flat, but they seem to try to manage the budget pretty tightly. So much so that, for instance, we had the emergency, what was it, 2 years ago, when we had to do the emergency capital appropriation because the deputy fire chief in Lexington condemned a portion of the building. And it was, what, a $400,000 repair bill, if I remember correctly. So they've been fairly tight with the money over there.
Just looking at the budget, 2011 was quite a bit less, it was 223. I don't know if there was what the student population was then.
Probably 9, I would guess.
And then 2012, 323, 341, and 13. And approved was 357 and 14, and then 389. But I know that there's an additional student this year.
how much is it per student?
Somewhere in the neighborhood, and I'd call it $20,000 for a round number, $19,000 to $20,000.
And where, if they stayed in district, it would be like 13,
12.
Under 13.
under 13.
It's close to the price of, I mean, it's a junior college price, really.
This is very different curriculum too. David?
Well, I think what Don says is right. Of the last 5 years, they have done a pretty good job controlling the budget. Before that, they did not. And as of a year ago, it was the single most expensive public school in all of Massachusetts. Now, I don't know if they've lost that ranking or not, but they're very close to it. So there was a long period of excess, and then the last 5 years or so, they've sort of plateaued it. The other thing is, I think there's an ability to pay, because if we've got 10 students in there, and our assessment is 300 and something thousand, we're talking 30 grand a student.
Right.
So we're paying
Something else.
Right, there is a
because-
formula, Dave's right, the Chapter 70 formula is applied there just as it is.
So I think actually the per student cost is more like 22, Don, than 20. And then we're paying more than that because we have an ability to pay to.
But that incremental amount is state mandated.
Oh, yes.
It's not just allocated to us.
It's not like the district is trying to stick something special to us or that we're doing anything wrong.
That's right.
Correct, state mandated.
That's right.
Okay, no, that's helpful because it's good to put sort of the baseline into perspective as we think about what it's changing to and how that benefits us, so
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Sure. So as far as the regional agreement itself goes, I'm just going to give you an example of the extremes. The 4-year rolling average for tuition for Dover is 1.5 students. The 4-year rolling average for Arlington is 125.8. So those are the extremes we had. Arlington is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Everybody else is much lower than that. Number 2, for example, is Lexington with 54.1. So, that's one of the things that we addressed, is that currently Dover has the same vote as Arlington. And Arlington obviously had some issues with that. But anyway, I'll just walk through the point-by-point comparison. Currently, the annual assessment, based on most recent year's enrollment share. Proposed agreement based on 4-year rolling average enrollment share, which is why we have these statistics about the 4-year rolling average. Now, capital costs, this is one of the biggies. Currently, based on most recent years' enrollment share, under the proposed new agreement, each member community pays one base of the yearly total. So the concept there being everybody should have some skin in the game, so your buy-in is 1%. The original, just to show you how much Arlington moved on this, the original proposal when we had our first meeting on this was Arlington wanted to see everybody paying 3%. So we got, and I was strongly opposed to that, as was several other managers. So we were able to get that down to 1%. So each member community pays base 1% of yearly total. 50% is based on the 4-year rolling average enrollment, and the remainder considers certain factors such as Chapter 70, basically the ability to pay. So that's how the factors come in there. School committee votes.
Excuse me, on that then, Bolton would effectively get some kind of surcharge if it's based on Chapter 70?
Well, it's not, I mean, I don't know if you'd call it a surcharge, I mean, it's all one formula, but yes, I mean, we would have more weight in that area because
Something
we're
above and
relatively,
beyond tuition costs.
we're a relatively affluent community. Certainly Weston really
Would-
takes it on the chin in a situation like
But
that.
that's evidenced by $350,000 assessment for 10 kids if it only costs
22.
$22,000.
yeah.
The math
But
indicates
this,
it's
but this is,
$15,000.
this is
capital.
this is the
Oh,
capital.
capital.
This is the capital. I wanted to see if it was similar in that regard.
Now, school committee votes. Right now, currently, each member town has one vote for all questions, or each community has 6-point-something% of the vote, because there's 16 communities. Under the new agreement, the weighted votes based on 4-year rolling average enrollment share. Incurring debt is specifically accepted from that, or it maybe should say exempted.
Exempted.
That's still one person, one vote, that's not, and would require approval by 2/3 of all school committee members, regardless of enrollment share or actual attendance at the meeting. So if there are 16 school committee members and only 14 are in attendance, you still need 12 affirmative votes at the school committee level in order to approve capital. The admission of new members. Currently, a new member would carry full share of capital costs from day one. Current language does not account for admission of a city. Whereas, under the new agreement, the school committee could negotiate gradual 4-year buy-in subject to approval by all of the existing member communities, and the language contemplates membership by a city, so it doesn't preclude a city from joining. Withdrawal of members, which is of interest to,
Excuse me again, but is the fact that they're mentioning cities significant since many of the communities are towns?
it is because there has been a desire in the past to potentially let in, to draw in a city, and they currently can't do that. But the withdrawal of members.
They currently can't do that? It's only open to towns?
Yes.
But can you just, I'm sorry, can you expand on that? So if you draw in a city and that's 50 more students and that blows up the building because of capacity, doesn't then everybody have to pay for that?
Well, theoretically, they wouldn't exceed their capacity. Then you have a waiting list after that. The withdrawal of members requires approval, as I said, by all other member communities, and the exiting member remains liable for a share of all debt approved while a member, even if its own residents voted against authorizing that debt. Whereas under the new agreement, withdrawal could occur unless disapproved by a majority of the other members. Qualified students could still be accepted on a space available tuition basis. If withdrawal is properly pursued following a district-wide election that authorizes new debt, the subject community would not be liable for a share of the debt that its own voters disapproved of. So
It must have been hard to get some of this through.
it was unbelievable. Because you really there was a lot of horse trading going on in there, but I think people in Congress could learn a lot from this, because what there was a lot of give and take, there was a lot of working together. I've always said that after the first meeting, I didn't think we'd ever agree on ordering lunch, never mind coming up with an
How long was the
agreement.
whole process, Don?
Year and a half.
So that debt thing, it used to be if one town voted the debt down, then no one gets the debt. I mean, then the debt didn't go through. Now it's, if a town votes it down, the debt
And
can
then
still
they-
go through, but they
Well-
don't have to pay for
Well,
it.
If
that's-
they leave.
If they
Oh,
withdraw.
if they withdraw.
If they withdraw.
So-
And there are two ways to authorize debt. There's Chapter 16D, I forget the statute, Chapter 70, 71, something like that. Section 16D is what we're all used to, which is each town conducts their ballot vote, and every community needs to approve it to authorize the debt. And this has nothing to do with the agreement, but there does exist another section called Section 16N. And the way that I remember that is because the N stands for nuclear, and I always call it the nuclear option, which is the school district, if they so chose, could call for a district-wide ballot vote. The district would have to pay for the entire election for all 16 communities. But then it's just the aggregate majority of the district-wide, not necessarily each individual town. So that is contemplated in this, and we have a very easy to follow flow chart which talks about how that could work. I actually have a blown up one in my office, and I'm proud to say I understand it. I don't know if I'm really proud of that or not, because it was pretty involved. But yes, that would be another way to do it. But that would never be the first step, but it could be the last. Contribution to capital costs. Currently, the current agreement is silent on that point. Under the new agreement, it must be applied to reduce capital assessments to members. So,
What are those gifts?
it could be a gift, it could be money from the state. I mean, it could be, MSBA type money. Now, the authorization for new debt, which is really one of the big ones. Currently, as this is not specified in the current agreement, either of two routes could be followed, which is what I just talked about. And actually, I just got ahead of myself and talked about the authorization of new debt, so I won't go over that again. Now, amendments to the agreement. Currently, to amend the agreement, it may be initiated by a majority vote of the school committee or by petition as allowed by law, and requires approval of all member communities. And under the new agreement, it may be initiated by a 3/4 vote of the school committee or by petition as allowed by law. And the current requirement for approval by all member communities is unchanged. Now, I should clear up one question that was asked at the selectmen's meeting. Actually, it was Dave who asked it, and I gave an incorrect answer. Under certain things right now, such as debt, if the district brought something forward, we can choose to not have a special town meeting for it, or a town meeting. And by not acting on it, that's considered to be a yes. It's not disapproval. It's just, we didn't approve it, but we didn't disapprove it. The incorrect answer I gave is that does not apply to accepting this new agreement. This new agreement needs an affirmative vote of all 16 communities. So if 15 communities voted in an affirmative manner, and for instance, one passed over at a town meeting, that's not passage, and the agreement would not pass until that 16th community voted on it. Or if they voted in the negative, that would kill the new agreement. So, and I think it's Lincoln who's the first one out of the gate. I think their town meeting is March 29th. So I'm not saying Lincoln is going to vote it down by any stretch of the imagination, but if Lincoln voted down that, the district agreement, we'd be done right there.
So, on the big picture here, the current agreement relative to the new agreement, strictly from Bolton's standpoint, what's better?
What's better from Bolton's standpoint, I think, is, I think one of the big ones is that if we thought someday, you know what, we don't want to be busing our kids to Lexington, it's too
This
far.
is where I'm going with this question.
Then we have a relatively easy pathway out, whereas under the current agreement, to get all 15 communities to agree to let us out is almost impossible. Now we need 9. So that provides us a way out. I think that's huge. And another thing is how we allow new communities in. I think makes it could make it easier to let new communities in, which if you expand the base, assuming we have capacity, easier to take.
Let people
Right.
out.
Then it lowers the assessment for everyone.
So assuming that's the case, is there any present capital projects that we are paying on debt? And is there anything on the forefront coming up? So that if this was a yes at town meeting along with another 15, could we, how soon could we get out? And then, again, to me, this is just like, if a kid wants to go there, just this district, just like the charter school going on right now, but why would we want to be involved with something where, again, there's this mandate on us?
Now, to change the mandate,
I know
it's
the
going to
mandate
be changed
can't
at the
change.
legislative level, but
I'm not looking to change the mandate, I'm looking to get out of this.
What's Assabet? Is it more, less? Has anybody ever checked?
Assabet, I think Dave's right, so about where Minuteman ranks as far as tuition, so I have to assume Assabet is somewhat less.
I'm trying to remember.
But I'm not sure I answered.
All
Yeah.
local schools are higher than academic schools.
You know, there is some percentage of our students who, for one reason or another, interests or career moves, don't want to attend a college preparatory school.
And I'm okay with that.
Okay. But if you don't belong to one of these communities and they don't have space,
Yeah,
And the tuition is higher if you don't belong.
and
Tangled.
then that child has no place to go.
Right. And every community is required to
That's
provide,
what you want.
every community is required by law to provide vocational education. And if there's no place for a kid to go while they're in high school, then you're still on the hook. They have the right to pursue it after they graduate.
Right. So, you know, there's two things you're raising here. One is, why belong to any one of them? And the other possibility is, the other thing you could be asking now is just, why Minuteman versus Assabet or Montechusett, right?
But based upon that rationale, Bob, what you're also saying is it's just a matter of time before we have a mandate on charter schools. So your rationale that because a kid doesn't want to go to this school, has the right to go to a charter school, so therefore we have to belong to a charter school group.
Well, I don't know,
Because-
but that's not, is that on the table? You're just saying.
No, I'm saying there's no, it can't be one or the other. And right now, it's different rules. There's a set of rules for this thing. There's and we also have to send money out the door for charter schools.
But the difference with a charter school is the student has to get into the charter school.
The check's big enough, they're gonna get in.
The student has to get into the charter school. And the charter school is only going to get so much money from the district, not from the town, mind you, the district, right? From the Neshoba School District, okay? We pay for the Minuteman. We pay for our students going to Minuteman. Students who go to charter schools are paid for by the school district, not by the town. So there's a major difference on where that money's coming from.
So your answer, I just would like to hear, Brad asked, a question about what's coming up, and I'd like to hear that.
I will. There is no, all the capital projects that have already been on the table have been brought forward, have been executed, so we have our share of debt that we're liable for. The only new debt right now that is on the table, and it's still a ways out, is what we do about the building itself, which is, do we renovate the existing building? Do we build a new building? And what is the size building that we either renovate for or build for? And what the school committee voted a few weeks ago is to go forward with a plan, because they have to have the design team work on some design. And what they voted on was to work on a building that will not exceed a population of 800. And as they're designing that, there's going to be pressure brought to bear on some of the non-member communities who are large senders right now, to try to get them to agree to get into the district. And if they choose to not sign the intermunicipal agreement that's being proposed, then they may find that they're not able to continue to send their kids to Minuteman. And as that develops, if, say, Community A has been sending 40 kids, and they won't sign off on this agreement, well, now all of a sudden we may be designing it for 760 rather than 800. And the reason we're starting at the higher number and working down is because it's much easier to start with a larger building and scale it down than it is to start with a smaller building and scale it up.
So when we talked about trying to get a city in the program, which might have a whole lot more students, they're not considering that by making it available to a whole lot more kids?
Well, you've got to draw a line in the sand. You can't say if we build it, they will come. So we have to say, this is the size that we're envisioning. I mean, otherwise, even with what we're talking about now, the very preliminary estimates are very big numbers for what we're looking at potentially.
How many students are there now? I should know this.
780 or so, roughly.
Oh, so pretty close to the,
800,
Yeah.
so it's not gonna be much
At
bigger.
Minuteman then?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, I guess I was thinking of the in-district, that's only about 400.
Yes, in-district is, because 40% of the student population is out of district, 45. And 48% of the student population are on IEPs, which is also why costs are high.
That's high.
So bottom line today is, we're in a district, we have, the only thing for us to vote on the table is to go to a new agreement within the district. I understand the question, those are strategic questions that should be asked, but it's not before us tonight. And in your opinion, this new agreement is better for both?
I think it's much, much better for Bolton, and as I've said at every committee meeting that I've been at and the couple of school committee meetings that I attended, the only reason that, in my opinion, the only reason you would vote against this new agreement is if you think the existing agreement is better. Otherwise, there's no logical reason to vote against it. And as someone who's worked on this for almost 2 years now, this new proposed agreement is thousands of miles better than where we are now. And it's imperfect, and to use a cliche, there's enough in here to irritate anybody. But this is the result of a lot of consensus building and a lot of give and take on all of the communities.
did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, in terms of a building, to making it bigger to get a larger city in, you're going to be raising the costs a lot and distributing among the same towns.
Okay.
And if your son's played football, so you've been to North Middlesex up in Townsend, they're voting this year on whether or not to build a brand new $89 million.
The numbers
School.
are big, right? The numbers are huge.
And they're not foreseeing any increase in population. It's simply to replace the existing school. $89 million.
What we're looking at, again, in round numbers, and I know when you throw numbers out, that's what people remember, but in very round numbers and very, very conservative right now, depending on the options that are chosen, the price tag that's projected is somewhere between $85 million and $120 million. And just to get the building code compliant, to do nothing but code compliance, is projected to be $35 million.
And under that scenario, how much, under the proposed formula, do you have an estimate as to what Bolton's share of something of that magnitude would be?
You're a good straight man, Randy. On the basis of a $122 million project, with 40% MSBA reimbursal, and we're hoping to do better than that, so we're being conservative with a 40% reimbursement on a $122 million project. The projected increase to Bolton's tax rate will be $63.31 yearly.
And when's this going to take effect?
Oh, the vote won't even come forward on the merits of the building project until May of 2016. So it's a ways off.
So that point by point, is there the possibility of making that some type of an addendum to the warrant so people can get a better understanding when they're looking over Article 8 as opposed to simply the summary?
Well, you wouldn't do an addendum to the warrant, but what could be done if anybody wants is, and I actually spoke with Jim Anker about this, if someone wants an explanation, a brief explanation as to you know, the comparison between the old and the new, I told Jim I am probably the one that should get up and do that. I wouldn't do an addendum to the warrant though, but I would certainly be happy to speak to it.
So maybe I'm using the wrong terminology, and I think that'd be a great thing if you're willing to do that. But is there the opportunity for that type of document to somehow get in the townspeople's hands prior to that night, so as to somewhat digest?
I don't know about prior to that night, but certainly when they register, if Pam was okay with it, we could have copies of this on the table
Well,
for people to take in.
is it possible for the advisory committee to have links to documents or to post documents on the town website, an advisory committee page or something like that?
Sure, I don't know why not. I mean, what we could certainly do is take this document and digitize it and get it up on the town webpage. We could easily do that.
Could, last question for me, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Could think about, not Randy, not anyone here, average angry taxpayer, could somebody say, and just, this is hypothetical, just bear with me, could someone say, I want out of this agreement, I see this cost coming down the pike and it's ridiculous. I'm gonna vote this new agreement down in hopes that that gives me some leverage to get out of the whole.
You can't.
Well, no,
When you
if
need
we
it-
vote it down and we're the perpetual thorn in the side, the other communities might say, forget you both and get out of here.
I wonder where Dover is.
Well, no, what they
Dover's
would
got
probably
it.
do instead, the way they pulled the thorn out of their side is not to do that, they do the district-wide vote as opposed to
Yeah,
doing the
it's
town by
forcing
town
it on
vote.
us, though.
Or they would
Yeah.
change the agreement so that you couldn't get out so easily.
Right, no, I'm just thinking, would somebody think that we have leverage by voting this down?
Yeah,
If
to
our
your
end
point-
game was to get out,
Well,
go it on,
somebody may think that, but the fact is,
doesn't
we would not have leverage, we would not get any leverage by doing that.
Yeah, and so your key descriptor of not anyone on this group, but just the average person not fully up to speed,
Right.
it's an easy jump to say,
Yep.
yeah, so it's,
So education might be important.
And that's why I-
Yeah.
yeah.
In fact, in the new agreement, if the town voted down the debt and wanted to get out, we wouldn't be liable for it. Whereas in
Even
under
if
the current agreement,
even if we in fact had started paying for it for a couple of years and then decided to get out, we'd be out from under future payments.
oh, I don't know about that.
No, I
think
thought
That's an important thing to follow
I
up
don't know
on
about
then.
that because we've assented, we started making our obligation. I'm not sure about
I don't
that.
think
thought
you
you
can
just
pull
read
it
that
out
to
after
us.
you.
Yeah, so you've got to
Did you-
decide
did you?
at the time you
Yeah.
turn down the debt to withdraw from the district?
Yes.
Right.
Well, that wasn't made very clear.
Oh, I don't know, I thought.
I don't think that was
read-
deceitful, it's complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
it's in,
Yeah, so
Actually, that was made clear at one of the tri-towns.
yeah,
All right.
And it was,
it's pretty.
I think everybody's
clear.
concerned about that, David?
Randy's question about how much it would cost, Don gave the per house figure, but if it's 73 million net of the state reimbursement, our share would be about 3.1% of that, so about 2.25 million. And maybe a little bit higher, because I don't have that ability to pay factor in, but roughly.
Over a 20-year term or something?
I think they're even talking longer than that, aren't they? Down in the
so.
amortization?
I do, yeah.
I think they were talking 30-year amortization.
As I recall, it was a 30-year amortization. I'm surprised you don't have an EQV tab on your calculator.
I got it up here.
Anything else that you'd like to?
As far as this goes, I think we're good. While I've got your attention, though, while I'm here, I would like to, I know you're going to be voting on the money articles later, and I would like to implore you to vote favorably on the cameras for the town hall. I think it's an extremely important thing to do. I think I actually give myself a black mark for not thinking of it myself. I know it was Randy who came up with the idea, and I'm all for it for a few reasons. One, I think it would justify itself just for the safety of the town employees, because we do have town employees coming in early, leaving at night, coming in on the weekend, and you just never know what is going to happen. Aside from that, this is a very heavily used building. by boards and committees most nights of the week. And, someone is going to be the last person to leave, and it's not always, people don't always leave with somebody else. A lot of times people do leave alone. I also worry about vandalism. It only takes one time for somebody to try to break into the building or do that. We would be able to capture that if we did have vandalism, and people coming in, just damaging the building or assault or worse on someone for approximately $7,100, I think is cheap money. And I'm the type of manager who would very much rather be proactive than reactive. And I would not want to have it on my conscience if I voted against this and 6 months from now something happened that was preventable. So for short money, for what we get for it, I think it's extremely important and does send a message that we take things like this seriously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything on that? Lighting, though.
I'm sorry?
The lighting in the building, outside the building is awful. I don't know where that comes from, but.
Yeah, I mean, we actually will, we will be taking a look at that. And also, just as an FYI, the chairman of the Board of Selectmen did ask me to get a sense from where all of the selectmen are on the police cruiser issue or question, so I could share that with you tonight. And the selectmen have not taken a vote, so this is just me speaking with each selectman individually. So I don't want to represent this in any way, shape, or form as an official vote by the Board of Selectmen. But having spoken with each of the selectmen individually, all three of them have indicated to me that their preference would be that we acquire one police cruiser this year, that it be paid for with cash, and it be a line item appropriation within the police budget as it has been in the past. So I just wanted to pass that on to you.
And the reason there had been a request to have the selectmen here tonight to talk about that, the ambulance and the fire apparatus, and they're not meeting to have that discussion until Thursday night.
Correct. In fact, Thursday night, Margie is coming in with additional information which was requested for the ambulance, so the selectmen could not even answer that question tonight as far as the ambulance is concerned, but the selectmen will be voting all their recommendations Thursday night.
Do you know, Don, for sure, obviously you talk to them all the time, and I understand the open meeting and you talk individually, but this is an obvious question, but I want to ask it, do they link the old fire station to keeping the ambulance like we have?
Yes, I believe they do.
I think so.
I think they understand, yes.
It's one or the other, sort of thing, okay.
In fact, I'm positive.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, any other questions for Don?
What's the status of the Conservation Commission article? Is that still in?
The Conservation Commission is voting on that this evening, and it is...
I thought it was tomorrow. It's today? They're going to be today? Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was last night, but it's actually tonight.
Okay.
They will be voting unless something...
That's right. I thought it was
Yeah.
last night.
I thought it was last night, it's actually tonight.
Okay.
But it is my expectation that they'll be voting to remove the article from the warrant. Because because the bid did come in so much lower than we had budgeted, so they'll be able to manage that within the money allotted to them.
And then last thing for me, I think didn't we have some discussion, I don't remember getting an update on whether the library cameras...
Oh, I can fill you in on that. You mean on how it will be funded?
Yeah.
They're meeting, the trustees are meeting on Wednesday. I had sent them a note asking if they were considering, as we had understood it, considering using the borrowing from the renovation to cover the cameras, and they have indicated that they have potentially a lot of things that they're thinking of using that money for, and they did not know if they would have $10,000 available for the cameras, and they would let us know after the meeting on Wednesday.
Because I noticed, and I don't remember this, it's combined now into one article out of cash, right?
It had been.
It
last
was
week.
always...
Yeah.
So do you think it's a selectman's preference to, well, we'll have to know. If the library has said no, then there's no reason to split it,
Yes.
right? But I wonder if it makes sense to
I think
split it.
I think you're right. It had started as two.
It started as two because there were two separate
Split funding.
separate capital questions and so forth, but then The selectmen said early on it made more sense to them to merge it into one.
And the only thing is that if library will cover it, then they'll come out of it, and then it'll be just the one.
Got it. Because we talked about it last week, like the library was gonna pay for it with their unused money, so we'll need to
And
talk
that had
about that
been- yeah.
differently tonight.
Well, we have no more information than last week, because we don't have that information on whether they're gonna be able to cover it or not.
Oh, I thought
No,
I
the
heard-
18th. The library's meeting tomorrow night.
Oh, but I thought I heard you just say that they're worried that they might not have enough. To me, that means they're never gonna vote for it.
Well, I don't know, but, it sounded like they have a lot of things they're considering, and we certainly indicated that we were hoping that the cameras would be part of that. David?
It seems to me if the library doesn't think it's important enough to use their money, I would be very resentful if they're using the town's money, because so I think it should come out of that either way. If they want a camera, they got some money.
Well, I don't think it's our
The
choice,
town
though.
building and
It's not our choice. I mean,
the trustees.
I may or may not agree with you, but I think the trustees decide whether they want to pay for it out of the unused
Oh,
money.
in other words, the trustees would be the sponsor of the article.
Who is it now?
Well,
Well, I guess,
I think what I'm talking about is the
I think
decision
it's
points.
a two.
If they make a decision not to, no, what you're saying is if they make a decision not to use their extra money to pay for it, then we should make a decision not to use any other money to pay for it?
Yeah.
Okay.
That,
Now, if they sponsor the article, they have the town pay for it, it has to stay on the warrant, but I think we should recommend against that, if they've got this
well, it's
alternative.
a double, the sponsors, the police department and the trustees, right now.
My question before Don leaves, the discussion last week that we had on OPED at the idea of getting the selectmen to come up with a committee, I didn't see that on this coming agenda, which is fine, but my main question is, do we anticipate an answer out of the selectmen prior to the town meeting? Because that very likely will, impact my vote on how I go on that.
That was my request.
Well, when we do the warrant review, the OPEB article is still on there, and under the review of the warrant, I was going to advise the selectmen on the proposal to form a committee and remove the article for this year. And as I have done various briefings with the board, I think they're pretty much up to speed on that. I'm not going to speak for the board, but I think they'd be open to doing that.
So if they said, no, we don't want to form a committee, then you still would want to put money into it on our own? Is that how you're thinking about it?
If I don't, if there's, I was in agreement last week on, on taking it off the table with the expectation that a committee would be formed. If I don't have that answer prior to town meeting,
Right.
I know I got to vote on this but
I'm speaking for myself. I would be shocked if the selectmen don't. It's a no-brainer to form a committee.
The committee that's charged with coming up with an answer before.
Coming up with an answer for next year's town meeting.
Yeah.
Because that's the important piece for
Okay.
me.
Easy. So, I mean, I would.
I think they should combine that with the old fire station.
No, the old fire station.
If you remember last year, I wanted an old fire
Right,
station.
we didn't get that.
Yeah, there's two
That's what I'm
different
saying.
skill sets there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, it has to be decided by
I
next
think
time.
I think I see two separate blue ribbon panels for that.
there's two separate skill sets on that. And it might be a little time value of money, but
And just one, since the volleyball game is over, I just got a text on that. I'll just want to take one more second. I copied Terry on an email to this effect, but I don't know which adjective fits best, but let's just say that I expressed enough angst to our electricity provider about the surprise that I had with our rates. I never felt they misrepresented the fact that rates were going to be jumping significantly. However, I wasn't prepared for the amount that it went up. Therefore, I could not prepare anyone else. I don't like surprises. I don't think anybody likes surprises. I had some level of conversation about how much I don't like surprises, to the extent that the energy provider, in the words of our broker, did something that is almost unheard of. They actually issued us a credit. So they issued, I'm going to get really close here, I think it was $5,911.21. and I had to decide where the credit should be applied. So I quickly went through the ledger and made the best decision I could based on the limited time I had. And I asked them to credit the electric bill for the DPW $1,000 and the balance $4,900 and change to the library, because the library was the one who was the most out of whack. And I felt by doing it that way, we could avoid the library having to come back for an advisory reserve transfer for their electricity. And the trustees agree that they probably won't need one now. Based on what I was seeing for projections, the fact that rates are already starting to drop again because we're currently on the variable, I'm gonna be coming up a couple of weeks with a plan to hedge our position, but right now, we're, for February, we're still on a variable plan. So I think I was able to get us to the point where the library may not need a transfer. So, $5,900 is $5,900. I applied it as best I could, which is why you'll see different run rates for that on the next ledger, but I just wanted to let you know that.
Good,
Sounds great.
thank you. Now you can
Thanks
just go
for being
home.
so
Or
warm.
whatever.
I was angst-ridden. All right.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Night.
So, next on the agenda, Police Chief Alfano will be in, the police department was participating in this Best Buddies basketball tournament, so he'll be in afterwards. So we have time now to review some articles and take a look at the newest warrant. I just would like to give Connie a minute, if you'd like. Connie, she wasn't here last week due to illness and has been attending, and we did vote on several articles last week, and if you had any comments or anything that you'd like to address.
I do. On the fire truck, I'm all for a 5-year ban. That's
We'll be
how I
back,
feel.
yeah, we'll
I
be
know
back to
about
that tonight.
Okay.
Okay, that one, we didn't vote on any of the
You want
money
to just-
articles. Just if you had any,
Okay, I
any
would
comments.
vote, I would vote no on Article 2.
We haven't been there yet. Why don't
Oh, I
we, maybe what we, to
Why
just
don't you
maybe
just show her
yes,
what we
what we voted on.
Well, I
Okay.
just got what you sent me, and
Yeah.
so you did say that.
Yeah, that we just voted. So we voted on Article 1, which is
Right.
accept, we haven't voted on 2, 3, or 4. We voted on Article 5, which is the reauthorization of the revolving fund, and that was approved. Article 6, dissolving the advisory board for the senior tax rebate program, we voted on and approved. Article 7, we are, which is the OPEB, is sort of in abeyance until until something is brought up to with the selectmen. Article 8, we have not, Article 8 was tonight, we'll vote on that
So
later.
let's start right there.
Right, we could do that, why not?
I,
Okay.
It's fresh on the brain.
Yeah, Article 8.
make a motion that we recommend approval of Article 8.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion to approve Article 8, amendments to the district agreement of the Minuteman Regional Vocational School District. And second, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. Okay, Article 9 is the amendment to the code of the town of Bolton to move the barn, stable, and carriage house preservation bylaw. Now, we did approve it last week, but you'll see it is much, much smaller. They've taken out the reprinting of the whole bylaw. And that was a recommendation that we had made. Is that, everybody get a chance to take a look at that? So it just says now, to see if the town will vote to amend the code of the town of Bolton by moving the barn, stable, and carriage house preservation bylaw from chapter 151, historic preservation, article 1, to chapter 250, zoning, article 5, special regulations, barn, stable, and carriage house preservation, and, okay, the rest of you can read. So that, basically, they took out all that wording, so that, everybody's good with that?
That cuts down 4 pages.
Yeah. Article 10, amendment to the code of, for some wording changes in the barn, stable, and carriage house preservation, subsection B2. We approved that at last meeting. Article 11, amendment to the code of the town of Bolton, Article 5, special regulations to add new section for mixed-use village overlay district bylaw. We wanted more time with this. Is this ready to be voted on now?
The only thing I'll say is they did take out the acronym that I asked them to think about, but now if you look in A,
Yeah.
mixed-use village overlay district is spelled, the first letter's capitalized, but then if you look on F, the whole thing's capitalized.
I mean, the whole, okay, so that probably is just a
shouldn't be-
typo.
And
Okay.
H, it's all capitalized, right?
G.
It should be consistent.
Well, there's a space here, what is this? Allow for increased building footprint mixed use district
M,
to maximum
capitalized.
operation. So that looks like there's some typos. So, where else, so H,
But other than cosmetic, I'm ready to vote the,
how about everybody else ready to vote? Is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve Article 11, mixed-use village overlay district.
second.
Okay, any further discussion? Yes.
Yeah, I just want to clarify my position before we vote, and just raise, I have two concerns. And I'm gonna vote no. And I want you to know, is it big, that I really thought a lot about this, and I did a lot of research on it. And so I wanted to just explain myself before we took a vote to that end. When we went to town meeting 2 years ago with this, I went in ready to vote it in. And I was very glad for the discussion that came out at town meeting. And I saw how that process worked, and I was glad that the planning board went back to the table and worked on it, and I saw I was excited when I saw it again come up. I had that same kind of like, all right, this is the one. And, but where I get stuck, and I can't ignore it at this point, is that effectively I would be recommending to voters that they don't have, I would be recommending to voters that they remove themselves from the process that I actually saw work so well to create a better village overlay. So it's that idea that there's a checks and balance system that, I've seen work so well. I have faith in the town meeting. I know it's not always pretty, but it gets a lot of good ideas out on the table, and this is a case where it did that. The housing component going back in, the traffic studies, the location away from the center of town and the S-curve, and but I believe those good changes came as a direct result of the town meeting having input. And so I heard Mr. Story say it a few weeks ago, or last week, and I heard other people say it, we're effectively voting that component out of this process. And I think Bolton, big decisions like big development, I'm not opposed to big development, but I think big decisions and big development have a place to be heard at a town meeting. And so that is my first and foremost concern, and reason for voting against, recommending that people vote for it.
So, the way this is written,
Yeah?
whatever goes in on those properties right now can go in at whatever as is. They don't have to. If someone wants to take that property,
Put a Lowe's on it.
They couldn't.
they couldn't do it, right?
No,
They could.
They could right now.
No, they couldn't. I've
still have
read
to-
57 pages of
No,
zoning laws to me that they could not do
If
it.
they have the right lot with the right coverage and it's business zone.
But they don't.
But they could tear
It
down.
would have to be the smallest Lowe's in the United
Yes,
States.
That's right.
exactly.
That's right.
But they could tear down something existing right now. and build a Lowe's on the Paradigm property.
Or maybe the.
They could do that now without town meeting. I'm not arguing with your.
No, but I understand what you're saying. It's
So,
your, yes.
But whatever the whatever the bylaw is, that following all those rules and regs, they could, whatever's gonna land there is gonna land there, and it's gonna, to Randy's point, it's gonna skirt, but it still has to go before the planning board, it's gonna go before the
Special.
select. There's a whole design review. This thing says, if you want to put in and have a denser, you want to have more of a building, you want to, try and get more capacity over and above than what is presently there, you have to do this. You got to throw on housing somewhere in the property. Even still, it's still got to follow the rules. It's still got to go for the selectmen, the design review board, the planning board. So
And
there's a lot.
And what you
still
might be
going on.
forgetting too, and again, you vote however you want, I think it's great. Planning board has a hearing, public hearing, multiple public hearings. Design review board will have multiple public hearings in which.
And we elect
resident-
the people that are,
Yes.
I get that, I do.
And which residents that are concerned, probably the very same residents that make up the 75 people quorum at town meeting, will come and voice their opinion or not. So I get your concern. My concerns of the same type are waylaid a little bit by the fact that there's still oversight and control and multiple levels of approval, with multiple public hearings in which people in a better than town meeting forum can express their opinion. So that's how I get around.
I think I understand your objections, and I would make the observation that the way this is written should move that conversation from town meeting to planning board meetings. And the reason that doesn't happen now is because people know that what's said and decided at the planning board meeting can be overridden at the town meeting. So people people don't go to the planning board meetings because they know it's got to come to town meeting. I prefer to have those discussions in smaller groups instead of the entire town. I'm also worried that this is the second or third iteration in years.
Yeah, if it doesn't.
And at some point, the people on the planning board are just going to say,
Yeah.
forget it.
And they've done a lot of work. I don't mean
Right.
to, I'm not playing that down at all.
No, I don't think you are, but I'm just saying, at what point do you say, no, you gotta go back and, work on it another year, and at what point do
I
they say?
know, I agree. I think this is the
So
year to
I-
make the decision as to.
And also further evidence, it's obviously, it's obscene on how long this is. And I was involved with this.
Well, it's
but
not if
it's-
you compare it to the rest of the zoning bylaws. in
Well,
town.
that's it. And, as evidenced by the barn preservation thing that went in last year, right? It was 4 or 5 pages deep. And last, May, the town said yes. But there was some oversight, there was some issues, concerns. So at the special, we had some amendment, right?
And now
And now another one. So we've already, and so I'll bet my house that this is not the last time you're gonna see this. If this goes through, there's probably gonna be reiterations, additions, we forgot about,
But I don't see that as a bad thing.
No.
I can tell by your body language that's annoying, and you're
No.
concerning.
It was, you're absolutely right. A year ago, it was annoying because I didn't understand it.
Okay.
But then I absolutely remember, and it might have been Doug who said, the bylaws, it's kind of like the Constitution. It's living and breathing. It's gonna change, and changing it should be the case. So, my language, my body language is, it was a total pain going over this, and there was a lot of people on the group that all sides were represented.
Okay. I still don't. I don't have that full picture, but I don't want that full picture. Because I really tried. What I had to do was isolate myself from kind of all of it and say, okay, why isn't this feeling right to me? And maybe it's because I grew up in the town and I'm used to, things. I've seen it ways, and I went through. I did take the time to read the zoning bylaws because and it was, I'm glad I did, because to your point, I got educated on what Bolton currently does have, and it has a lot, a lot of the design, the bulk of what's in the village overlay is in some way in our zoning laws already, and how it looks, and the attention to sidewalks and pedestrian mobility, and so all of that to me was positive, and I agreed with it. Again, for me, it's that as much as I respect the board of selectmen and the planning board, they're 8 people. They're elected officials. They're 8 people who I would assume have a lot more knowledge than the general person, maybe about how the things are going on. But at the end of the day, I've been to more than 10 meetings, I think, in my adult life of town meetings, and I've seen good things and good ideas come out of that.
This is what happened. This is one of the things that happened out of it.
I mean,
Agreed.
you gotta think about it this way, you think zoning should go to the town for decision and approval, right?
For certain, not for everything, not for
But think about
everything,
this,
because the special permitting process works
One
well.
of the things that is embedded in here is the prospect of having multiple buildings per lot on a business or limited commercially zoned piece
No
of
problem
land.
with that.
Right, so, but voting against that, that's gone.
And so I would argue, bring that to town meeting as, let's add this to the
But
zone.
they won't, but no, town meeting would never approve that without oversight and controls on it,
Right.
which this does.
Which of this house, yeah.
Okay.
To expand on Randy's point, you then have to get everybody at town meeting's approval about which building belongs where and where it should be oriented, and should they be.
I understand the black hole. I do.
Yeah.
I do. I
And the
just.
design review board is a relatively new animal, and that's helping
Yep, yep,
get
and I
this
saw
whole
that,
thing
the
good.
amendment to it.
I think
one question.
the objection that you're bringing up is going to be the main area of
Okay.
discussion at town
Okay.
meeting.
Would it, I'm sure we're ready to vote, but there's also the open hearing on Wednesday. Would that be of interest for you to hear before you voted? Or not necessarily?
I don't think I can get there, unfortunately, without.
A week from Wednesday, right?
The 26th, I'm sorry, yeah,
Oh,
26th.
okay.
Well, also rest assured, and we never maybe told you this, but
Okay.
let me tell you now.
Yes, oh God.
Please have this from you.
When we vote, if we vote tonight, and if something we may, if it's 5-1, we put approved
Yeah.
as the
It used to
recommendation.
be a different.
We don't put 5-1,
Okay.
okay?
It'll be in the minutes,
So,
but it
I
won't
don't
be.
know
No,
that-
that's fine.
So you
I
can-
just,
you can
it
still
more was to
stand
you,
your
because
ground. I mean, no, I just, I don't know
You
if that
can
helps.
speak at town meeting
If
as
I was mad.
So we have the option,
Citizen.
there is a motion on the table, so we.
So can I voice just one
Oh,
more?
there was-
I had two
Was there a
concerns.
motion for this?
Yes.
Yeah, we're in
It's
discussion
Brad
of the
and-
motion.
Brad and
And
Randy.
so this is just my final piece, and because it's important to me, I've spent so many hours over this, that if I don't say this, I'll regret going home and not have at least given you my take. I have one other concern about the proposed article, and that is that the land that is to the east side of 495, it has changed in its footprint from what it originally was in the village overlay in 2012. And what it's changed to is it is included now residential property that in 2012 was very highly debated as to whether or not it should be zoned business. And so I would look at that and I think to myself, if we're purely voting on the merits of the village overlay, and yet there's this piece where there's
But that,
there's
still
a
residential.
change.
That's still residential.
It's still residential. I have an email out to Doug Story, and I haven't heard back from him yet, as to whether or not that changes, that residential acreage can then be included
Yes.
in
It can.
factoring in a larger building on the business zoned lot.
It can.
And so to me, that's a conversation that happened 2 years ago that the town voted down, and now it's come back up, and I
But I
don't
think you're-
like the impurity of that.
But I think you're thinking of the lot to the east of that on the corner.
No.
That was the big issue.
Isn't
No,
this
no.
is the piece isn't this piece in the back, the
Yeah, they
residential
wanted to
piece?
join,
Yeah.
they wanted to join something.
Over to Hudson Road, right?
And-
The,
And
Right.
And it's
the
not,
Kane proposal, that got voted down.
yeah, it was the Kane, but it's not about that corner lot. because they've left residential and they've left a buffer, I saw that. But it's about the idea that this, if we're talking about the village overlay is least effective to residences and
There's no question that the village overlay,
effectively changing that.
even on a business lot, makes the building bigger.
Right,
allows
right.
for
And so I
8%
guess my point is it's come up, the town is very concerned about putting new rules around that land.
Right.
And there it is, it's almost the exact same footprint, and so it just, I don't know,
I thought the issue
Concerns me.
last year wasn't that it was residential, it was that it was two separate lots.
Yep, that they want.
Part of one lot was residential.
And they wanted
Right,
to,
they
they
wanted
wanted
a
to
piece of
change
it.
the zoning on one piece from residential to commercial,
It wasn't that
so that they
whole
could do
lot, right.
something. That failed. This doesn't do that.
No, it still keeps it
This keeps
residential.
everything as residential.
right, and I heard them say, this does not rezone, the village overlay does not rezone
Right.
a residential lot to a business, but it does change the ability, it allows that acreage to then be factored into certain building restrictions that, or lack of, or not, building
It
equations
does.
that allow that to be built on, so again,
But
I'm
that's not the
just,
same issue as the Kane property, though, just so you.
okay, help me out.
The Kane property had a residential and a commercial parcel. They wanted to, if I remember correctly, they wanted to combine them into one big commercial parcel.
That's the way I remember it.
Yeah,
And we said, no, the residential has to stay
that was a
residential.
separate article.
There's a
The
separate
Kane-
article
the
just for
Kane-
Kane.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
so
it was
this wasn't
part of-
prior to the village overlay, which
They
is why,
want-
again, I don't.
And I think
But they
there
want
they
to
wanted,
redesignate.
and they wanted the bigger part, they
They
wanted
did.
to be able to put a,
Bigger
they didn't
building.
care about the village overlay passing,
They did
because
not.
they
So
really wanted
why
it.
then is it in here, why not just keep it business on the east side? Why did, when
Because
the,
both pieces are owned by the Kane family.
oh, okay.
That's my understanding,
Yeah, I
right?
think so.
Both pieces,
Well, what do
the
you mean, keeping
residential,
it both?
the residential is owned by the Kane family.
Okay.
And they would still have, as I understand this article, they would still have to come to the town to get it rezoned
Yes.
away from residential.
Unless they come up with a
But-
citizen's petition
Yeah,
again.
I follow
But
you.
you're correct, I believe you're correct in saying that, in terms of how big a building can be and the hardscape and all that stuff,
Okay.
that residential component is considered a part of the whole thing,
But
and
they can do that now.
And actually, it makes sense.
Without
because
the
it-
village overlay?
Yeah.
I'm
would
not
they-
sure about
They can
that.
only do it at 10%, at 8% coverage.
But I don't think they can include the house, the residential portion on that.
I don't think
In
this
their factoring
allows
of
them
the
to do
8%.
that, though, either.
Okay.
I don't know, I mean-
So that's, again, like,
So
maybe
so
maybe
my
next
question
year we
comes
would
back to, as part of the discussion, would it be are these the type of questions that that could be brought up at the,
I don't want to delay the vote, if everybody else is.
No, well,
well, but maybe some of these, these questions would be
Need
good
to be
to
clarified.
be clarified. We've waited other times to, on articles until after planning has had their open.
You certainly can wait.
but those meetings have been earlier in the process than
Yes,
this.
yeah. Well, we still have another.
I think this option gives a very distinct, a new alternative to a developer to develop otherwise unquote-unquote developable land in the spirit of what we're trying to do, and there's enough oversight and regulation on it that it will still allow the best interest of Bolton to be taken into consideration, and I voted for it last year, and I plan to vote for it this year.
So, how does everybody, just as part of the discussion, we do have a motion, and we'll be having to vote on that, but would anybody want to wait, or are you pretty comfortable with this?
I'm
Okay.
comfortable.
I'm
You
okay. I'm okay.
Okay,
Yes,
so that's fine.
If I could just address
Sure.
something that's in here.
Where are you?
Section M on page 9.
Open space and public amenities?
Yeah, it's got to have 10% publicly accessible open space, which, to me, excludes the residential area, right? You can't make, if it's residential, it's not
Can't be
going to be
public.
public accessible.
Parking's gonna be in the back, and
Oh, yeah, believe me, the aesthetics of why, I like the aesthetics of the village overlay, there's no doubt about it. I think it helps everything.
But,
There's-
to me, that is more to Randy's point of that residential cannot be included.
I don't think it can, I don't think it can then, and I don't think it can now.
I don't see anything else that references that.
Because that's why they wanted to change
Yeah.
it here.
Right, so that's-
The Kane property,
That's
there
different.
was one parcel,
In the
and
back.
a part of the parcel closest to 117 was zoned business. But when you got more than 115 feet off 117, the same parcel became zoned residential. And I think there's a chance that the village overlay district includes both parts
Well-
of that single parcel.
Yeah, it does.
It looks like a piece of it, it comes out of your.
4D 33.
And so I think you always have the right to go back to the original zoning. The village overlay is not replacing the original zoning. It's
It's an
You
alternative.
can use it if you need it, and if you don't need it, then you don't use it.
But they would certainly use it. They would
The
certainly use
Kane
it.
property, when we voted on it, they
They didn't want
the
them.
village overlay.
No, they wanted a big-
The article was not about the village
Okay.
overlay. They wanted to be specifically excluded from the village overlay.
Okay,
And-
thank you for
and
But they
this.
wanted to change the whole
They
thing.
wanted to change the
Yes.
whole thing to
Which
commercial.
did not happen.
Yes,
But then
that way
as-
they could just go and
Build
build,
a 10 to
Huge.
8%,
Yeah.
one building.
Yeah.
under the old bylaws, under the standard bylaws.
Yes.
And before this was finalized, I mean, as mentioned last week, you know, the Kane family, there was a representative from the Kane family that was brought in. And so all the,
Oh, you mean this has happened,
exactly,
yes?
yep, this
Mixed use.
article has been reviewed and
see-
and provided to all those, every property that's listed in this, the present owners were asked, and they willingly came in, and we sat down and went through this and reviewed, and they were all, you know, happy to see this.
So, but to that point, I have a question then. As good as the relationships are, and I can totally appreciate that, and that's a lot of work to get all those people together and in a room and in agreement and excited and, you know, again, good things happening for Bolton kind of thing. But wouldn't they have the right, once this passes, to then sell all that land, which has effectively increased in value? And we don't know who the next person is that has that piece of land.
But they're still gonna have to go
They have
through
that
the
right
same,
now.
they can do that
It
now.
doesn't matter.
And then they have to still go through the whole, all the whole
but- and
process with.
But they won't have to go through the town. And my point is that the town is the one who has the relationship right now
But this
with
is going
the.
through-
This is what the town is gonna vote on.
And
So
the-
if they vote it down, that's one thing, but if they vote for this, then that process
And
seems to make a lot of
the
sense to
planning
me.
board
I mean, we
champions your
can't control
interests.
everything, you know.
I'm not asking,
Just like, I mean, we could take that same rationale and say, wow, I mean, yeah, these six jamokes up here deciding the finances, right? Why in the hell don't we just let the town figure? I mean, that rationale could be thrown out
and
across
yet if I
every
was
single.
getting constructively criticized or, you know, somebody was saying, hey, I mean, that's why I brought it to you guys and not to town floor. I would, because I trust that you would give me good input back.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
yeah, it'll
And I
be
know
brought
town
up.
floor gets a little more dicey, but I see it in a similar situation, maybe it's just because I.
I'm sure you're gonna see another
This is
Home
not-
Depot building.
This only applies to
No.
5 parcels of land?
Not even.
4, so whatever it is. So the town is voting on the prospect of this potential on a very controlled population. of
Hands down,
space.
much better location.
And so
Sasha,
they-
totally
my Home
understand.
Depot comment was,
Oh, I'm sorry.
was sarcastic
Sarcasm.
because that was thrown up on the big screen
Yeah, it was.
as a nice
Oh,
scare
okay,
tactic.
okay.
So, but I'm
No,
still
but-
confident you'll see that again at this town meeting.
But, so I guess, you know, to your point, not to harp on Home
So,
Depot,
wait, at
but,
least you weren't accused of owning land right next door. I didn't even receive a letter. The town didn't even send me a letter, because they did tell everyone.
Okay, how are we gonna?
yeah, go, I'm sorry, I know it's gonna be
This-
long. I
think
just,
we-
thank you,
we
thank
heard-
you.
We heard it, and I'm glad you spoke, and any,
Yep.
yeah, okay.
Thank you.
So we have a motion to approve Article 11, and it's been seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No,
Okay, so moving along, this takes us to page,
So tell Connie, we voted on the flood maps.
no, I know, I'm getting there.
Oh.
Well, that's what I was
That's
trying
what
to
I
get
was
to.
going by.
So page 10 is Articles 12, we actually grouped them together, 12, 13, and 14, all the
15,
flood,
16, 17.
no, 12, 15, 14, I
I'm
think.
just
Oh,
remembering
okay.
The ones you,
Yeah, no, those we voted on, and those were the floodplain and related. Article 15
Okay.
was on medical marijuana, and we voted to approve that. And Articles 16 and 17 were related to that original one, and we agreed to approve that.
No, it's a budget, we're not done with the budget.
Okay, and then there was Article 18,
You were
Tim-
at medical marijuana?
Yeah.
okay, temporary
Same as
moratorium
yours.
on medical marijuana treatment facilities. That where recommendation is to be made on town meeting floor, because if the previous one, whatever that was, 13 or 14 doesn't pass, then this one would come up for the temporary moratorium. We want to wait. Article 19, on 20, on dogs, we voted to approve, on kennels, I
Yeah.
should say. Article 21, on the Drumlin Hill, Ledgewood Circle and Fieldstone Way roads, to approve those, we voted to approve. Pedestrian Mobility Fund, Article 22, we voted to approve. Architectural design and engineering work for a new town vault, we voted to disapprove.
yeah.
No, did we? Yes, we did.
You sent me
Okay.
this.
Yeah, I did
email
send you
with all
that.
and
Yeah,
I did go
okay.
through it.
And then so now we're on Article 24, which is paint and repair of the old fire station. Again, I would imagine we're gonna wait on this one until we see what happens with the selectmen on the ambulance.
Yep.
So then we
Do you want
have,
to post us for Thursday night?
I think we're posted.
Is there enough people that are going Thursday night that we can vote some of these Thursday night if we?
They meet at 7, right?
Maybe it's 7,
We've done
right?
that in
And
the past.
I'm gonna try to be there, but.
I think I'm going to be there, so. It's not mandatory, it's just something we've done before. At the
Yeah.
I
last
won't get
minute.
there till like
Yeah.
7:30.
I think the timing, I was just gonna
There's a
look,
couple things before.
I'm sorry, I've got to see if that's not here.
Yeah, there's a possibility I could be there.
So, I just want to see the timing, I think that for the agenda for the selectmen
Yeah, do that.
is
They had something from 7 to
7:45, I think. Why do I think? Do you think that's right? Here we go.
No.
They're going to be talking, yeah, 7:45, well, at 7:30, the discussion is with Margie. So at 7:30 is the discussion with Margie on the ambulance, the trade-in ambulance.
Okay.
7:45 to 8:45 is their voting recommendation. So is that something that people wanted to come to that meeting and try and get this
I will be there.
accomplished?
I should be able to be there.
You will be here. Okay.
I'm gonna try my best, I have it here.
You look great.
Brad?
I'm gonna, I will try, just.
Okay, let's see
it's
if we
hard.
can get a quorum. But it's also, these are important articles that people probably want to be part of too. Okay, Article 25, Sanders, body replacement and repair, again to state the capital planning book said.
Bob, have you had a chance to do your field trip?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, yeah, Bob was gonna, so capital planning, this was number one item for them, number one. And you were gonna
Right.
take a look at
Well,
repairs.
yeah, before I go into my spiel, I think we should take a little break here because, not to interrupt the meeting, but I think before we vote on any one of these articles, we've got to step back and look at how much money we have, how we're going to use it, and all that other fun
I
stuff.
got that. And that was actually, I was thinking, Bob.
All right? So,
Very good.
I'm happy to start my spiel now, but I don't think we should vote on anything until we've kind of got, on any money allocation until we've got the whole thing together.
Okay, so this is the newest iteration of the spreadsheet, and what I did for that this time
Yeah. Just the judge.
was, We get it, I don't know if,
So
Chief-
159?
yeah.
$11,000.
Fireman.
Fingers aren't working,
So Bob, we have not voted any spending at all.
except for the 30,800.
Right.
Except for-
To not.
But we agreed,
Yeah,
that
we
even
have
though we
to-
voted no, we still have that
Exactly.
sort of score.
Yeah, no,
right?
Yeah, I know.
it's your
I know.
cat. So let me just do like a top side of this thing, and then we can talk about. So the number, we haven't received an updated spreadsheet from Julie, but the number from last week, which is 176,000 something, has been increased, which is the unused tax levy, has been increased by 39,158 for the adjustment to the NRSD assessment, which was lowered due to acceptance of tiers, and I don't know which ones were and weren't. And then an additional $700 to adjust the Council on Aging budget, which brings up the unused tax levy as of, I'm saying March 4th, but it's as of today, is 216,421. And then I've double underlined that, so just sort of setting that aside and not.
What is it, 700?
From the Council on Aging, it's an addition. Their budget was too high by $700.
Excuse me.
So that both of those are an add to what there was on the March 4th, which is right here. It was 176,563, and then just adding the 700 and the 39,158 brings it to 216,421. So then we have the free cash, $1,087,866, less 150,000 right now. That's a snow and ice deficit reserve. So far, $275,000 has been requested to be overspent. And then the free cash minimum target of $250 brings us down to $687,866, was what the figure you had last week.
Yeah, but I thought we had a discussion on whether that 150 should be in there or not.
No, I don't think we had a complete discussion because,
So all the
I don't
math I
remember
did
any-
last week did not include that, I thought.
no,
So-
you gave, I had wrote down the amount that you came up with, which was exactly this number, $687,866.
No, this is my sheet from last week, and I had 837,866, because I didn't include the snow and ice.
I'm not prepared to take it out right now, but that's certainly up for discussion. So, we can discuss it now, we can keep going. Then the list below is of, the OPEBs is removed, but otherwise it stays pretty much the same. The question mark, I mean, there's several question marks, is whether, you know, what's happening with the 28,000 for the old fire station is still there, as is everything else, including both cameras and the usage of the library expansion renovation to cover the cameras. And then 17,000 for the total school spend, which is 2 articles, gives us requested spending of $850,928. Which is $163,000 short from the available free cash. Now, just as an aside, I talked to Donna about what we can, you know, if we were to do bans, what might be bannable, if that's the terminology, the culverts and the rescue equipment.
The fire truck is
The fire truck, yes, fire truck, but I thought we,
And the cruiser too, right?
right, but, yeah,
You thought we were,
I thought that was going to be staying. I thought, oh, I guess we did have the discussion. The 545, I thought on the fire truck, we kind of separated, yes, that can be bannable too. So there's, I mean, yeah.
but an important concept of the ban that I've learned since last week is it's not as easy as I originally thought it was. We do need to have it voted.
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's a borrowing.
So it
And we
comes out of the
didn't know
budget.
that last
Oh,
week.
no, I knew it, I'm sorry. That
So
it has-
we have to have an article, if we decide to ban anything, even though the debt's inside of 2.5, you have to vote. If the town takes on debt, you have to have a vote. And I think it's confusing for the town to, it could be confusing for the town to distinguish good debt from bad debt. But it's something to point out. That changes my opinion a little bit, especially with relation to the cruiser. The good thing is though, is if we're still thinking about trying to defer the cruiser payment, that would make an argument for a lease. Even though the lease is at a higher percentage, you do not need town meeting approval to enter into a lease because you're not putting any debt on your books.
The concept of it, of
But
putting the ban,
But back in the cruiser, but
Yeah.
hearing from Don tonight, let's remember, this is the selectmen's budget. The selectmen have spoken essentially in the
Yeah,
cruiser.
they'd like it in the
And
budget,
if they want it in the budget with cash, I don't necessarily know.
which is consistent to what has been done
We've done it, yeah.
for
Yeah.
several years, and I know we have the conversation yet to have about the cruiser.
Let's be clear, it's not for cash. It's going to be raised out of either tax money
Right.
or other available funds.
Well, everything, yeah. Well, it's covered by, yes, I mean, everything is raised by tax money. We're sitting here
No,
with,
we've got a pile of
Not the
cash we're
area.
going to divvy it.
well, right now it's included in the, right now
Right.
the cruiser is in the 216,421. It's
Right.
still sitting up there.
Right, it's part of the budget.
Yeah.
Which is
But-
what Don meant to say, I think.
Yeah, I don't think he meant to say cash.
Yeah, part of the budget. Okay, everybody, yes, David?
I think what Randy said was dead wrong. The selectmen haven't made any opinion at all. I think Don made a mistake to come to you and say that he had had that discussion with the selectmen. That's something they should decide in an open meeting, and in their open meetings, they generally get input from other people, and that input could lead them to have a different opinion. I think you should think that the cruiser is definitely open, and if you made a recommendation for a ban or lease, I believe they would listen. And I think Don was wrong to do what he did.
He did say he spoke to the chairman.
He said he
Each individual.
spoke to each one individually.
Which is one individual speaking maybe for two other.
No, I think he
Yeah, he
said
said no,
he spoke to each individual.
Oh, he did.
Yeah.
Separately.
And I still think that was inappropriate. That was something that belongs in an open meeting.
Okay,
Yeah.
so,
Well, let me break that out a little bit. The police cruiser, to me, is sort of an up or down vote. What we do with the police cruiser does not affect our use of cash at all. It may affect the unused tax levy or something like that,
Right.
but it's not going to affect
no,
our
because it's
allocation
because of where
cash.
it's sitting.
If you do a ban, it defers it for a whole year. You don't start paying on it till 16. So
Right, but the
it's
top, it doesn't
40,000 in cash.
affect the top section of this spreadsheet versus the bottom section.
Well, if it were a ban, would it be removed out of
Yeah.
out of
You'd
the...
get a negative 42 in there for
Yeah,
a ban.
you'd-
Right, but
yeah.
I think you were, I don't know, I don't want to speak for, I don't know what you're trying to do. Were you going to the bottom section, allocating the
Well,
free
here,
cash
here
versus?
it's neutral, right?
Well, right, that is just there because we
It
keep on
would
talking about
become
it.
totally negative.
No, it would just come out all,
That would make the
No.
216 $30,000 higher or $25,000 higher. for
The only reason it's neutral here, Bob, is because it was included above, and so we couldn't count it twice.
All right.
But if, for example,
Well, we know-
if it's going to be a ban, then it would come out of the 216, it would increase the 216 by the 40,000, and it would come down to become a,
Okay.
you remove the parentheses.
All right, so
Right.
we're not going to pay cash for it, under any circumstances.
Yeah.
We're not going to actually pay cash for it. And the discussion is, do we borrow, do we lease, or do we raise the money by taxation?
No,
So
why
all
are you
of-
saying we're not paying cash for it? I mean, we're paying
We're
out
not
of
paying
the,
free cash.
or not
We're
paying free cash, right.
So it can come off this page altogether.
Yeah, I think it was on there just to defend it.
Placeholder.
was that we had still thought about maybe taking it out of operating and
Right.
putting
That's
it
right,
into cash.
and also because it was being discussed by the capital planning group. So,
So I'm fine.
So it can just come off altogether, and it doesn't affect any of the other numbers.
yeah, it doesn't affect it anyway, but that's okay. That's good, okay.
Okay?
Here we- Speaking on time, we're talking about police cruisers. Who won?
Well, they won one and we won the other, so
It's a tie.
we got a trophy.
who sent more people to the hospital?
I think we were ready to go.
Yeah, they're a little younger, right?
A lot more powerful.
Okay. Well, we have Chief Alfano here, so He's right on time. Defer the rest of this conversation and ask you to come up to talk about cruiser repairs.
All of you.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a good Thank you.
Do you have any action for those? Walking through everything.
That was pretty interesting.
Well, I sent out to Terry in advance some information that I thought the committee might find helpful, because I know we had a very lengthy and spirited discussion at the last meeting regarding the science of fleet maintenance and cruisers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Since I spoke with you last, I went out and talked to quite a few people in the industry and looked at quite a few other fleets to get examples of where we're at compared to other departments. I think the last time I was here, I showed you a survey of area departments as far as the numbers of cruisers. And we're actually on the low end. I have another one of those if somebody needs it for comparable departments. What we did, and what you'll see in your information packet, is, let's see, my folder is we looked at, Bob had sent a template for a graph to us, a very thoughtful template, and we spent many hours trying to decipher it, and there's a reason why none of us are math majors in college, but it was a great tool for us to work with. We gave it a shot, we gave it the college try. However, and you'll see in here, there is actually the two color prints. You can see the different graphs. Okay, these represent, for the most part, 2013. Now, we went back to service records, which I have, probably about an inch thick here, if anybody wants to look through them, for every car. Now, you have to keep in mind, some of our cars are over 8 years old. 8 years old. So, needless to say, when we had repairs back 8 years ago, it was tracked differently than we track now. What we did since last year, when we met last year, and actually, Randy, you were instrumental in this, we started tracking by individual cruiser as opposed to flat costs as far as for the maintenance. Now, when we went back, we tried to use your format on the graphs, which was mileage versus year, but when we looked at it,
There was no year in there.
Mileage versus repair.
repair costs, excuse me. When we looked at that, we really couldn't give a true and accurate figure, and there were a number of reasons for that. Number one, cruiser numbers change. When cars are cycled through the fleet and given different assignments,
That would be a problem.
it's a problem, yeah. The cruiser
One
numbers
might be
change.
one again.
Well, they'll never be the same number, but they're most likely a different number. For example, for command and communication purposes, the chief's car, and it's like this in every department, it's always car one. So, as you know, since I've been here, I've never had a new chief's car. I always get the recycled queen of the fleet, and we make it work. But that, whatever that car was, if I get that car and we peel the stickers off it and take the cage out and take the light bar off it, that becomes car one. So for us to go back and look at a car one back 3, 4, 5 years ago, it's a totally different car. Right, so it really kind of skewed the numbers as far as the numbers. What we're gonna do now, starting this year, is we're gonna actually track service by VIN number of the car. Which means when you ask me next year to see the service record of every car, I can say it's by VIN number, vehicle identification number, as opposed to cruiser number. And
So they're going to start that in 2015?
oh, we've actually started that now. We started that now, yeah. When, also another concern that we looked at when we started pulling out all the old bills was that we deal with 5 to 6 different vendors for cruiser repairs. They could go to MHQ, Municipal Supply in Marlboro. If they're a Dodge for repair, they could go to Colonial Dodge or Imperial Dodge, which is down in Milford. For electrical repairs, they go to a different vendor. For any type of a small repair, they could go over to J&K Tire over in Hudson. So we're not dealing with just like one bill from one vendor. And often when a cruiser goes in for efficiency, what we do is, if it's gonna go in, say it needs a new alternator, we'll grab an oil change while we're there if it's close to needing an oil change, because that way it's there and it doesn't take it out of service for a long period of time. So the bills, you may get a bill for an alternator, because that's what the cruiser went in for, but there could be an oil change in there too.
Yeah.
And if you remember, we used to track oil changes separately.
Right.
That was recently combined, which I think was a good idea. So oil changes now fall into repairs. I think you saw in one of those articles how important oil change cycles are. I know it's probably boring stuff unless you were a motorhead to read some of it, but I actually talked to the author of those articles, Ed Sano. He's like the top guru of police cars in the country. He's actually world renowned. He's written probably 10 books. And he's real good with cruisers, everything from the history of police cars, he's written books on that, to fleet management. And I talked to him about those articles, and he's right on the money, I think, with a lot of those. There were a couple of them that I just wanted to sort of paraphrase with you. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I think the most important one was the one that talked about replacement cycles, because that's actually what we've been talking about. And even within the industry, as you can see, there's different philosophies on replacement cycles. But the general consensus among most police departments, and I will quote you this because I think it was so important. It says, plotting the acquisition versus the cost of operation on two curves, which cross at about 85,000 miles. And I was actually thinking of Bob when I read that. And it said that means beyond 85,000 miles, the total cost of ownership increases. And this next sentence here, it says, do not put a $4,000 transmission in a vehicle worth less than $8,000. Well, every one of our cars, with the exception of two right now, is worth less than $8,000. The only two that are worth street value more than $8,000 are the two Fords, the two new ones. And this sentence, I think, was very telling. Maintenance and repairs should never exceed 50% of the value of the vehicle. Again, most of ours clearly will exceed that. I was speaking with the chief of Stoughton Police today, and we were talking about this, and I was picking his brain on what they do down there. They have a much larger fleet. They have about 40 vehicles, so they have a lot of wear and tear on them. They also crash more. So he had a lot of information on that. He gave me an example where they had kept an older cruiser that they had wanted to replace, but they didn't have the funding to replace it. And it was a Ford, and they had to put a new engine and a new transmission in. The transmission was $4,000, the engine was $2,000. So that's $6,000 they invested in that car. A week later, that car was wrecked in a cruiser accident responding to a call. The insurance value that they got for that car was not the replacement value, it was the value of a Ford Police Interceptor it had, I think, 95,000 miles on it. So they were basically out the $6,000 they just dumped into that cruiser. So his words of wisdom were, be careful. Again, don't put too much money into something with close to 100,000 miles on it. Another telling sentence in that article, it said, after every type of study, the vast majority of your peers, being other police chiefs and police departments, take their patrol sedans out of service between 90,000 and 120,000 miles for an average of 103,000 miles. The last paragraph in here I thought you'd find interesting. There are some truck-type police patrol vehicles, specifically the Chevrolet Tahoe that a lot of departments are going to because it's a truck-based chassis, and they'll get 125,000 miles clean out of those on the road. They tend to last longer. The only problem with those, and they're wonderful vehicles, we've test driven them, the only problem is they're not four-wheel drive at this time, they're just two-wheel drive. And as we talked about in the last meeting with the demographics of Bolton, we really want to move towards a four-wheel drive vehicle. So that was an interesting twist on that. But what all the industry standard seems to be coming out at is focusing on mileage not true mileage, but actual true mileage, but, you know, we had talked the last meeting about the idle time, and I think you saw what I had said echoed in one of those articles. What I actually did for you was in your packet, there should be a mileage chart. You've seen this before?
Yep.
The second page of that is modified to reflect the idle time in the actual mileage, and it's just about doubled in all the vehicles. So, front, actual odometer miles. The second page is actually the wear and tear on the engine and all the moving parts of the vehicle. So that would be like the civilian equivalent mileage.
You have clocks in those things that track this?
Pardon me?
You have clocks in the cars that track this, the idle time?
No, what we used for this was an average of 2 hours per shift idle time. And idle time is defined as an officer sitting by the side of the road running radar, an officer out at a call with the cruiser running like he's at a car accident with the lights on, because you can't shut the vehicle off or the lights will burn out.
But if you did but the mileage is doubled from page 1 to page 2 on everything. So
2 hours.
hours per one, so.
That's 66 miles,
Well, average 60, actually,
right?
compared to,
That's 60.
Right. Now that can fluctuate based on whether the car is used 3 shifts or not. Like, for example, my car 1, I try not to use it 3 shifts. If I get called in at 3 in the morning, I do. But, so that could actually be lower. What we did was we took worst case on that particular
But
thing.
the cars aren't all running 20, so I guess I'm just confused.
They rotate around though. It depends on, if a car's out of service, another car could be running 3 shifts to take its time. What we looked at, and I spent a lot of time discussing this with Lieutenant Nelson, who's actually the fleet manager. He couldn't be here tonight, he had another engagement. But what we foresee is we're behind the 8 ball with the fleet because the cars got old, because we interrupted that cycle. The cars got old. If we add a vehicle to the fleet, a newer vehicle, next fiscal year, as we're asking for, what that'll do is that'll replace obviously one of the high mileage cars. That would put us in pretty good shape for the following year. So for the following year, we may be able to again reassess the fleet, and we're looking at sort of resting 6 months or resting a year. That would put us, I think, in a pretty good position to do that.
Even though you've got
What-
3 up to 4 at 100,000?
Well, what we would do is,
Well, the SRO, the patrol cars.
right, the first line cars, right now, the first line cars, they're out there, and, you know, they're rolling 24/7. If one of them goes down, one of the secondary vehicles picks up the slack. If there was one other lower mileage car in there, it would ease up a little bit, because we could actually do a cruiser rotation. A lot of departments do that. Because of the condition of our cars, we can't necessarily do that right now.
which ones are these, are the SUV, the Ford?
2 and 7. The 2 and 7 are the newer ones.
So they're recommending 175,000 miles to be run on those?
No. What they talked about in that article was a truck style SUV. The Fords are not, they're more of a minivan style, like an Explorer. We don't have any of the vehicles they were talking about in the last paragraph there.
So which car would you...
Okay, I'm just reading
I'm sorry.
SUVs, where do you see that?
Oh, that was in one of those articles.
I'm reading that article. It says police SUVs, yeah.
I don't think
No,
that's...
truck style.
We don't have one
We
of
don't have
those.
them.
Yeah, those specifically,
The
what they're
SUVs
referring
we
to.
have are different.
Yeah, they're referring to the Chevy Tahoe, which looks, it looks like actually, you have a vehicle similar. I think you drive one similar.
Used to.
It used to. It looks kind of like that, only it's police
Truck
He's
rated.
watching you, be careful.
I see her everywhere.
No, it's true.
No, I do.
No, it's way better.
That's right.
You better be waiting.
So, yeah, the question, probably 3? Is that
So
one?
as far as replacement, as I told you the last time, we just put 2 new doors on car 6, or car 3 rather. Most likely car 6, which is our traffic enforcement car, the 104,000 mile one, that would be the next one that we would, and it's still, right now, in a position to be repurposed. In other words, we could give that to, say, the DPW, or we could give that to Town Hall. And again, as you know, as I've told you in past meetings, I do have a concern about residual value and residual use, because I really like to recycle the cars. I don't want to just put them out at auction and sell them off for, the most we could get, even for the Dodge Chargers at an auction, if the town were to auction it off and the money would go back to the general fund,
Yeah, I know.
would probably be like $600 to $1,000. I think the Taurus we got, the last one we auctioned, we got 600. So if we can help out another town department with a serviceable car, and the condition is such, then that would obviously help out the overall town budget.
I think you just said you'd replace, is it car 5 you said?
6.
No, 6.
You replaced
Probably
those.
the highest mileage car, which is 6 right now.
We
Okay.
they just did the doors on 3.
Okay, but the total expenses on that car are $15,000. You have 2 cars that you've spent considerably more on than that one.
Mhm.
You spent $18,000 on the 2010 Dodge, and you spent $16,000 on the 2007 Dodge.
Mhm.
So why would you keep those, it seems to me those other cars are more expensive to keep.
Well, they've been repaired, so the things that broke on them were repaired, whereas those particular items may not have failed on that particular car.
But they're ready to, potentially.
They could, sure, sure. And actually what I did, I know, we all can sit around the table and talk about cruisers. I actually brought a cruiser, it's parked right outside with me, it's got 127,000 miles on it. And if you'd like to take a break for a minute and go up and sort of poke your heads in it and look at it, I'd be happy to show you some of the things that are gone or worn on it. It's out there if you want to take a look at
That's
it.
that former car 2? The
That's
2007?
the former car too, right. That's up there in case you want to look at it. And things that I would point out to you on it, for example, are the spotlights on the sides. It's totally worn out. You go to move it to stay in a position, it just flops and drops. The steering wheel has chunks taken out of it, just have fallen out of it. The steering is loose, the steering box is shaky, the engine has a knock. There's rust forming on the outside, the door molding's falling off. These, those aren't abuse, that's just, it's wear and tear
Yeah.
on the particular car.
Are these 2 graphs that we haven't gotten to yet, maybe I'm going out of order, but is the top one true mileage and the bottom one's modified mileage? Is that-
No, actually,
They're
we,
not-
Cumulative in one's individual.
yeah, these graphs were our stab at Bob's chart that he
Yeah.
sent. And as I said, we really couldn't truly reflect what we thought were the true values, but I wanted to include them to show you that, this is, it sort of shows.
The bottom is cumulative, obviously.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the top one is
Just
is
the
as-
2013.
as it goes.
Right.
as it goes.
Yeah.
How much for that car between 35 and 40,000 miles?
Right, but these figures don't go back.
No, I understand, I understand.
I think a good way to demonstrate is if you look at, if you go to the left corner at 0, see the light blue line that's down flat, that's the new car, the 2014. So as you can see, there's really,
So
so
what
it
happened
does
to the
emphasize
what
it.
happened to the 2008 Ford so early?
That's
It's
gonna
a
ask the
total
same
spike,
question.
right?
Yeah, we had, I think it was a transmission issue with that car. Some of these cars have had big
And none of
repairs.
it's under warranty?
No. No,
What's the
the police
warranty on
warranty
it?
is different than on civilian cars.
What is it?
So it depends on the component.
Okay.
We also had a radiator failure on a number of cars. I'm talking about the big ticket items.
So there's no
Small
bumper
things.
to bumper to 36,000 miles? or anything like that?
No, police cars are considered severe duty or severe service.
Well, no,
Rusty
I'm saying-
Jones?
Yeah.
It's
Is it Rusty
3
Jones?
bullet holes, and then,
Yeah.
then it's
Then it's
out
out
of
of warranty?
warranty.
I know it. And a couple of these cars have been in minor accidents too, so, repairs for those would be covered in here too. So, they actually, knock on wood, our track record is outstanding compared to other departments on that. So we've been fortunate as
So-
far as that goes.
Chief, my question is, a few minutes ago, you made the comment that if you get a new one this year,
Mhm.
that it will look, by next year, that will have kind of smoothed things out and put you in a better position for the fleet, and there's the potential that maybe we can take a breath at 6 months or a year,
Right.
which is encouraging to hear you say that. I guess my concern is, but at the same time, a few years ago, you had to take a break, which subsequently put you into this position.
Right.
And so I'm trying to understand the difference of whether it's a, you know, a mandate by the town that says, ain't happening, not enough cash, or you coming back and saying, you know, we're good. I mean, there's a year you're going without a vehicle, and so I guess my point is, it was great to hear you say that. My concern is next year, if we do follow through on that, right, we might be dealing with this again. So I would be hesitant to.
Well,
to go there.
But to put that question in context, before you skipped, did you get 3 cars in a row the preceding 2
Oh, yeah,
years?
good point.
That is important. Did you get 3 years in a row before we skipped a year?
We did, but they had skipped before that. So, in other words, there was a previous break to that. I guess, to answer your question, we never really had a chance to catch up. And
When we made you take the pause.
Right, at both times. Now, I'll draw a parallel with, I think we need to evaluate it every year. And I'll draw a parallel with the motorcycle. As you remember, several years ago, we put in for a motorcycle for traffic enforcement, also to save gas. It was during the gas crisis, and it was approved. It was voted. I got up and spoke at town meeting. The selectmen approved it. I think advisory approved it too, if my memory serves me correctly, and it was approved on the floor almost unanimously by the town. The town was in very dire straits back then. It was a real tough financial time for the town. I voluntarily withdrew that motorcycle. That was a lease. It was a $10,000 a year lease. I voluntarily withdrew that because I knew what the town was going through budget-wise. So I guess you can say we took one for the team.
Yeah.
I have no issue doing that.
Did we get a car that year? You didn't get a
No,
car?
that was,
That year was a lot
that
of.
was bad year.
No,
Yeah.
and
That
so
was
Randy,
your
thank you for bringing
high
that up.
overtime.
I mean, that's definitely a big component. So I agree. I mean, it obviously has to be a year-by-year assessment, so we're still
Right.
working this out. So it might be 3 consecutive years where things start to look good, but who knows?
Right, I
But-
mean, hopefully we're
But it's
sitting.
hard to track this because of the uncertainty.
Right. I mean, what I would like nothing better than be able to sit at this table with you next year and say, the fleet's in good shape. I think we might be able to go another 6 months or defer it or whatever. But I think it's premature to say that until we really see what happens. I don't have the crystal ball. I don't know if a transmission is going to fall out of one of the older cars. I don't know if a cruiser could be in an accident and we could be looking at insurance money and replace. That's what happened with, that's how we got the Expedition that we have now, is that the Explorer was totaled in an accident, was parked, and it was struck by a truck. So it wasn't a fault of the officers, but we were able to get the Expedition that we still have now, that's the one I'm using, car 1, with the insurance money, so that the town really didn't buy that car. So stuff happens that could totally affect all of them. Now, I'm not advocating we go out and wreck a car so we get a new one, because we certainly
I
don't want
was
to do that.
I was just
but-
trying to figure out, like I said, it was encouraging to
Right.
hear you say that, but to me, whether it's because the town put it on you or you're coming to us saying, you know, we're good, you not going a year is the same thing. And that was my concern on if that happens, what are we gonna look like in
Well,
the future?
one thing that came out of all the research that I've been doing with other departments, and a lot of departments, they go strictly replacement by the mileage. And I think you saw that in one of those articles. They said, you know, as soon as the car gets to 95 to 100,000 miles, get rid of it. And,
Actually, it was 125.
well, there was an average, I think, 103 they were saying.
103.
Yeah, they said get rid of it, and there were a couple reasons for that. One, obviously, it broke the golden rule they were talking about costing more than the value of the car. But 2 was, again, the residual value, because some departments, mostly out of state, because they have different laws, they outright sell their cruisers. In other words, when they, and a lot of times they'll make money doing it.
We were talking about that taxi cab.
Yeah, they
Taxi cab.
sell the cruisers. Now, we can only do an auction, obviously, by law through the town. The money goes back to the general fund, so it really wouldn't reflect on my budget. It's like the ticket money, that the cruiser that's parked outside, we use that as a traffic car. That car's worth about $1,000. That car probably brought in $10,000 in revenue last year for the town as far as citations. So it sort of earned its keep last year.
Do motorcycles get idled Do you keep motorcycles idling like your cruiser?
No, motorcycle you shut off. They're very thrifty on gas. You can actually shut it off when you're running radars.
They start quickly, too.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but what would the addition of a motorcycle do to your fleet?
Well, it's like anything, there's trade-offs. Traffic enforcement, there's nothing better. A motorcycle is probably the best tool there is for traffic enforcement. As you all know, living in Bolton, the biggest concern any resident ever comes to me on are traffic concerns and traffic complaints. I was going too fast, I almost got hit, I was in a crash, etc. It's people don't come to us and say, you know, I'm worried my house is going to get broken into, or I'm worried that I'm going to be attacked on jogging on Main Street. Everyone in town has a concern with traffic, as do we, because of the statistics. Again, the last traffic study, 25,000 cars a day drove right by the front of this building in 1 year. Traffic drives most of our work. It drives our arrests, it drives our accident rates, it drives the insurance in town as far as insuring their cars for accident rates in the town. It drives our arrest rates for warrants, for drug arrests, for operating under the influence of alcohol arrests. Motorcycles are the best tool for traffic. They're also the most efficient law enforcement tool next to a pedal bike for gasoline. Motorcycles don't use a lot of gasoline. A lot of positive things. They're phenomenal for special events. As you know, in Bolton, we're always doing parades, we're always doing road races. Motorcycles are phenomenal. They're great morale for the officers. They like to ride them. There's a lot of pride in them. Those are all good things. Downside to a motorcycle, the downside. You can't use it all year, obviously. You can use it spring, summer, and into the fall. You have to be careful in the spring until the sand is swept up, so you really have to, speak to the DPW to get it's the timing on the sweeping. And they are more dangerous for the operator, obviously, than a cruiser.
So insurance.
Not so much insurance, physical danger. In other words, a lot of cars, that's why there are motorcycle accidents. A lot of people drive with tunnel vision towards motorcycles. They think that a motorcycle driving can do the same thing a car can do. So they may pull out in front of a motorcycle that if it was a car coming, it could stop. A motorcycle would have to take evasive action and could crash. So there's the danger element. They're more dangerous to operate than a cruiser. And there is the seasonal element. They're a great auxiliary vehicle to have. Most of the area towns around us have at least one motorcycle. The larger towns usually have more. When I was in Framingham, we had 6.
The reason I ask is to lessen the blow of a skip year of a cruiser.
Right.
I'm not talking about it for this year. I mean, I guess I'm thinking about it, but you might want to get a motorcycle in the skip year.
Well,
motorcycle.
I don't know, but I called state when you asked for it last time, and I can't remember the gentleman I talked to, but he was pretty high up the food chain. And you know how laughter is infectious? That man laughed so hard, Chief, I have to tell you, when I told him I was from Bolton and what would a motorcycle do here, he could not stop laughing. He said, I don't see why they would want a motorcycle in Bolton, is his comment. So,
Well, in summer
it's
months,
like,
they can patrol.
It's traffic miles.
It keeps miles off the cruiser.
Yeah, do that idling.
Where do you have to do traffic
Yes.
enforcement except on Main Street?
We do traffic enforcement all over town. I mean, the volume is Main Street.
But
Corner of Sugar
using
Road,
the
that's a
motor
great
city,
spot.
Forbush Mill Road, Green Road, I mean, they go everywhere.
I don't mean to
Green
derail
Road's
it.
really curvy. I'm thinking even parts of Berlin Road would be more hazardous on a motorcycle.
be surprised I'm
I'm just thinking, one of the things the chief could consider, whether, we get, looks like we might be leaning on approving one this year, is if the day does come where we can skip one, instead of putting us into a predicament that we had before, we might want to next year think about, if next year's the skip year,
Right.
what a motorcycle would do to preserve the longevity of the fleet that we just built up for you.
It would, because we could,
It's a lower cost.
yeah, usually you run the motorcycles on the overnight shift, but you can run them obviously in the afternoon shift.
Because if you think about it, if you go
wouldn't
every
run it
3
in the
years, you get in the cruiser, you lease a motorcycle for 3 years, you skip a you know what I mean? It could work within, it could almost get us to this every 8.
And we would
schedule
we would
with
lease
something in the middle.
motorcycle.
But as you put that analysis together, if you could also take into consideration, would it impact liability insurance?
Mhm.
What is it going to cost to get? I'm assuming you're going to need at least 2 officers trained to, have the
Right.
license, and then is there the expectation that their compensation goes up? So all across the board.
Right, yeah, to answer that question, no, there's no compensation, it's a vehicle. So they would,
They actually
their pay
sell
rate
it.
stays the
So
same.
training costs, any other ancillary, because
That's not what we miss, is those little
I
answers.
think we asked,
Yeah, but-
not,
We actually-
we asked a
we
lot of
did.
these questions.
Right.
There's
Yeah,
there's
it's not that
officers
much
that are
to
currently have
train.
motorcycle licenses.
Yeah,
Do.
yeah, and obviously, I mean, there's gonna be a savings
We
on
asked
gas.
about the insurance.
Free
It's
right
not that
now.
expensive.
Yeah.
Savings on mileage too,
Yeah, I
how
mean,
much
it's,
less idle time on the cruisers because you're now.
Well, you
idling.
would,
True.
you would park a cruiser and.
Park the
the
equipment, and the
motorcycle.
officer would take the motorcycle instead of the cruiser. Or on,
You can see that
like
on
the
this
traffic car,
Friday
for
night.
example.
No nights.
No nights.
No nights.
And most motorcycle
No.
traffic enforcement, I know Bob had a question about, tough motorcycles
Last
driving.
6 months.
Most of the time when motorcycles do traffic enforcement, they're not chasing them, they're stopped and they're pulling people over by hand. Because we actually have a motorcycle radar, they're battery powered, they're very small, so the motorcycles actually have radar. And
So not chasing necessarily.
no, you have to really be careful on a motorcycle, they don't do high-speed pursuits, it's against the policy. The motorcycles they operate at lower
Wouldn't
speeds.
be on green road.
Yeah, you wouldn't see any
So
high
not
speed.
chips.
Yeah, it's not chips, no.
No, so not chips.
But to your point,
Yeah.
yes, it would rest the line cars, because if the motorcycle would be used instead of,
Yeah, it wouldn't be.
unless it was say a traffic grant, when they could be used in addition to it. It's a lot easier for them to get through traffic too. I'm sure all of us have sat on 117 if there's an accident at Bolton Orchards and you watch the police cars and the ambulance and fire truck try to squeeze through. Motorcycles, when I worked in Framingham, they were great because they actually could go up on the sidewalks. You can get through into areas that you really can't traverse. So there's a lot of merit to what you're saying.
But it's not an instead of vehicle, except maybe in this kind of a transition period.
Instead of
It's
a
enough-
cruiser, you get a motorcycle.
Yeah.
For the
This
one-
year,
Yeah.
it saves us the cost of the cruiser. We don't
Yeah.
buy it, we lease it.
And a lease, right, because when the lease is up, you simply turn it in and you
Get
get
another
another one, right? And actually, I kind of prefer the leases, as you know, we looked at leases for the cruisers. The initial cost was more expensive, but if you get a lease with a maintenance rider, which when I was in the private sector, our private cruiser fleet, that's what we did. The maintenance is covered under the lease, so you're not looking at
And the lease you gave
the
her,
package
that-
bills.
Was that
You
the
get a new
situation?
car.
No, that cruiser lease, no, maintenance.
How much more is that
So many
on
miles or so many
the
years?
maintenance package on, do you have any chance now?
I don't remember the figures from 2 years ago. It wasn't excessive.
Okay.
It was not excessive, it certainly, I think it was $5,000 a year for the lease for a motorcycle, if my memory serves me correctly.
$5,000?
I think it was $5,000.
David?
Looking at the cumulative cost and dividing the number of years old the car is and so forth, it appears to me we're spending about $3,300 a year per car on maintenance. If we went to every third year skipping one, which the advisory committee had more or less consensus on a couple years ago, that would save us an annualized $13,000 a year, $13,300. Even if maintenance increased per car by 50% because we let the fleet get older, you'd be talking a little under $5,000 a year versus the saving of, well, in fact, the increment would just be the 50%. So you'd be talking something like,
$1,800.
yeah, $1,800 a year. And you're spending $13,000 a year extra to do this every single year. I just think that's economically ridiculous.
No, we had that conversation, and there's, I think, and,
I don't think we had the cost.
well, we were talking about the 13,000, I
Yeah,
know
with
we
the
didn't have
13,
a...
yeah. But what we didn't have was the other side, and I think now we do. Now it's with the fleet, the age of our current one, we spend $3,300 a car. let's say we go to the 2 years on, 1 year off, and let's say that leads to a 50% increase in cost per car of repairs, which I think is pushing it. That's an extra $1,500 a year.
In
And we're
total?
saving 30, yeah,
Okay.
Per vehicle?
per vehicle. And we're saving $13,000 a year by, well, I see what you're saying, I have to do it on all the vehicles.
Right.
Yeah, okay, so it isn't this, all right.
Yeah, and the other thing too is if you've got the problem with these.
It's still
Right.
12,000,
Yeah,
10,
yeah,
11,
yeah.
or $12,000.
But then you have the problems of vehicles being in for repair, not being available to be used, if the fleet is really significantly
And
old.
it hinges on, I mean, I know it's better than any other number, but it hinges on your 50%. I don't know if I agree that 50% is conservative. The vehicle
Yeah.
gets older, transmission blows, that's $5,000.
And then you're putting money on a car that's worthless. I mean, we wouldn't do that, I wouldn't do that on my cars, you know, that if you're having to spend so much money to repair it.
Right, he went in, if he goes in with a $100,000 cruiser to get a transmission, $100,000 cruiser to get a new transmission, they tell him not to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
What the
It's
lieutenant
worth
said,
more than,
Right.
the repair's worth more than the cruiser.
right,
Yeah.
what the lieutenant said he's seeing now with the older cars is the average repair, every time it goes in, it's $1,000. He said you can use that as a rule of
A
thumb.
benchmark.
If it goes in, it's $1,000,
Wow.
because they go to fix one thing and they say, hey, your alternator's worn, your belts are worn, so I mean, for safety, I can't put a cruiser on the road that I don't feel is safe. I think I mentioned to you at one meeting, the lawsuit that Boston's facing because they knowingly put a fire truck on the road and didn't maintain it because they didn't want to spend the money, crashed into a building, killed a firefighter, and that lawsuit, which Boston will most assuredly lose, will
Cost
pay
them more
for
than that.
the maintenance of fire trucks probably for 20 years. It's a multi-million dollar lawsuit.
Yeah.
You notice when I do these charts, I very rarely, if at all, will put poor condition, because I couldn't in good conscience, and with the liability of the town, I couldn't put a cruiser out that's in poor condition and ask the officers to drive it, because should something happen, you know, there's a concern.
You know, to a point Terry brought up, what would be involved in, how much more work would it be for you to track when vehicles are out of service?
When they're out of service? Well, they're always out of service when they're in for repairs, because the
That's
average,
specifically,
yeah, we could, if you were looking for a figure of days, it would be very difficult to go back. We could certainly do it going forward.
I think, you know, I understand why you can't recreate these numbers for past years.
We're not paying you to do that.
Yeah, it's clear, and I don't want you to do that.
But I see what you're saying.
But it's the other half of this
Right.
coin is, yeah, it's less money, but I've got,
Yeah.
you're,
If I'm taking it out of service,
I'm
what is
taking
that?
out of service,
I
yeah.
can't do my job.
Right, I'll give you
Well,
an
wait.
example.
Not all three patrol cars, they overlap sometimes,
They
though,
do,
right?
yeah, they
But you
overlap.
only have 2 patrol cars patrolling, or 3 a day,
It
during the
depends,
day.
it depends on the shift, and it depends on whether we have grants out. It depends if officers are at court, if officers are at school, because remember, we let them take the administrative car if they're going to training, because then we don't have to pay their mileage out of pocket, so it's actually cheaper to let them use that.
So they leave the patrol car behind.
Right.
Yeah, so, but what I'm saying is, you made the comment that he couldn't do his job.
Possibly.
You-
Yeah, you run, I mean, sometimes there are 3 shifts, and he was saying last week.
I just was
You know,
wondering,
there are
too, how
times-
often are there 3 shifts of, you know?
Or three are out. If you had
Three are
if you had an accident, two
Right, there's an
police
overlap.
cars go over, and then there's an
Right.
overlap, and you could have potentially 3.
Yeah, if we have
I got you,
if we have to
Brad.
I mean,
bring
it's not
extra
all the
officers,
time.
no, it's
They're
they,
pretty covered.
it's a shell game, right, it's a shell
Right.
game, but,
Right.
2 years ago,
That's
when we really were hurting towards the end of the year, we were running out of maintenance money, I actually had to use my own personal car with a stick on blue light, because mine was out of service. I'll give you an example, my car 1, the belt, the pump, the water pump shaft went, and it blew the fan belt, which blew the fan, and the fan, when it blew off, went into the radiator. That was a $2,300 repair. My car was in the shop for a week for that one repair. So I guess to answer your question, the average of cars out of service is 3 days to a week. out of service for a
Or
repair.
you know what, maybe you set some, I'm just suggesting this to make it easier for you. Maybe you say that, you know, if I send it in for an oil repair, I know it's gonna be 2 days. Or if I gotta do tires, it's gonna be 2 days. So I'm only gonna track when the car is out more than 2 days, how many times that happens and how many days over 2 days a car is out, that kind of thing.
I'm sure that, yeah, you have to, I mean,
You know,
theoretically, no, like you say, you can't go back and do it,
Yeah.
but it would be probably.
Yeah,
easier
we-
for
that is
them
something
to
we-
kind
Going
of
forward,
figure it
it's
out.
the flip side of these mileage figures, which would be
Right.
helpful for
And
next
that
year.
data is, naturally, it's helpful for us when we're talking
Right.
to you, because, you know, I can tell you a car's out of service for a week, but
Yeah.
if I showed you numbers, you know.
And you can also evaluate when you come in next year
Right.
to be comfortable with what you're asking, because if you're gonna say, we don't need a car this year, you know, I would think you'd really wanna know, backed up by, you know,
Right.
what the realities are, that you can do that.
But, go ahead.
No, you can go.
But to add on to Bob's point, right? I mean, fast forward 5 years from now, it's going to be one additional data point that you're going to be able to present.
Sure.
And say,
Yes.
oh yeah, I know that when the car hits 65,000 miles,
Right. Yeah.
not only is the here's the expenses, but my percentage of time up,
Off the road, yeah.
So that's just going to be one
Right,
added data
I
point.
can attach the manpower rate, for example, you know, whatever my salary is an hour, if I have to go help one of the officers pick up a car, and I'm driving back and forth for an hour for a day, you're not paying me an hour to shuttle cars.
Yeah.
So, yes, you're right, we could attach that
Yeah,
to
it would
it.
be reciprocal.
The only question I have, and I'm not gonna pick on this idle time thing, I know you just did a proxy times 2 of the mileage, right? But that's not accurate for a lot of these cars that are not patrol cars anymore, right? Because if someone goes to court, they're not leaving the thing idle
No,
and
but-
when you take your cruiser home, your mileage home and back here is not idling, right? So they're not, so I just wanted to make sure that was true. And then secondly is, what is the policy on idling? Like, what is the theory behind, you go to a call and you leave the cruiser running instead of shutting it off and starting it? Is it gonna blow out the starter? Is it a battery concern? Is it,
Getaway.
is it a policy that
What
cruisers have to be on all the
It
time?
would depend on the circumstance. For example, if a cruiser goes to a car accident and the officer is out for 45 minutes to an hour at the accident, the car has to idle because the emergency lights are on. The officer's in and out of the car running license plates. The car's in the roadway, you know, as an emergency vehicle blocking traffic. You can't shut the car off. If they go to a call at a house where they say there's a call at a particular house or a medical call, normally they can shut the car off, unless they have to have the car in the street to mark the location so the ambulance can.
So it has to do
it's a
with the
case by
lights.
case.
You need the battery to be recharged by
It's-
the alternator while the
it's-
car's running to run predominantly the lights.
Right.
I understand.
And-
Or if you're in the car, I guess,
Heat or.
yeah, and if you're doing vehicle, what do you call that, stops.
Motor vehicle stops, you always want the car
You
running.
have to have the car running, yeah.
But,
No, but it's
I
not
don't know.
all the time. It's
No.
24, I mean.
No,
all
not
the time.
always,
Okay.
no.
About 2 hours
Time to get out
per
of the
shift.
car.
And one advantage to the new station, when we put that sally port, the garage on the new station, in the very severe weather, when we were over at the Houghton building, if the officers were in the station and there was a raging blizzard, we'd keep the cars running out in the parking lot to keep them clear and warm.
Yeah.
Now, whenever there's a blizzard, we'll bring both the cruisers, if they're both in, bring them in, and they stay inside the heated sally port. So that saves us gas, because naturally they shut them off, so little economy of scale there.
Can I ask a big picture question? It sounds like there's been history and discussion about, 2 years on, 1 year off, potentially. But with everything that I'm hearing, it sounds so much like the ambulance discussion, where it's really specific to the year and to the calls and to the accidents, and so is it that industry standard said, based on all of that information, 1 car a year takes care of that, or was that just based on mileage specifically? And doesn't this seems like this is the way to go, is to have you in every year, and here's case by case, and add the data points so we get more information. But at the end of this year, it seems like a no-brainer to have a new. I mean, if we're still on that, right? That this is the debate over, or the conversation
this year.
over the cruiser.
Yeah.
And so, but I heard Brad say, like, well, one of these years you're not getting a cruiser, and I understand, like, if we don't have the money for a cruiser, we don't have the money for a cruiser, but at the same time, we can't, if there's 3 fair cruisers and then there's one that's going poor for some reason, you know, the industry standard somewhere, or however you rate that, because really it's specific to you rating the quality of,
Right.
you know, based on certain mileage and repairs and, you know, all that stuff. So I guess I'm just trying to get the bigger picture here. Was there some established, like, this is definitely on, or was it like, we're gonna take this year by year?
The history was that every year, and certainly feel free to correct me, every year the police chief comes in and lays out his reasons for needing a new car.
Okay.
And there's always this debate.
Okay, so this is not new.
This is
Sorry.
not new. Every year.
I knew, that's why I asked.
And then a couple of years ago, it was, well, okay, look, we'll give you cars, we gave you a new car last year, we'll give you a new car this year, but next year,
Well, no, but let me just be clear on that.
and
We handed this off to
Now we've
capital
changed our mind.
planning because there is some math you can do, which is what we're
Right.
trying to do.
That makes sense.
Suggests what the replacement schedule should be. We handed it off to capital planning a couple years ago and said, this is perfect for you guys, you go figure out what the recommended timeline should be. And they came back and said, every 18 months, we can see ourselves getting a
that's
new
true,
cruiser.
that's right.
And we said, we can't do every 18 months in the budget. Because we're gonna give you funding, but you can't, it's not enough funding to buy a cruiser in that fiscal year, so you have to bank that funding and then buy. So we said, all right, every 18 months doesn't work fiscally, so 2 years one-off is equivalent of every 18 months.
Okay.
And that's
Yeah,
sort of
that's
how
what
this
happened.
evolved. But it
Yes.
wasn't just us making the decision, it was working with capital planning,
Yeah.
figuring out every 18 months is the standard, which I don't know if the chief ever really agreed with, but it was the working
And
assumption.
then, so the asterisk
And-
was kind of like,
Yeah, and that's-
unless
that's
the
how it
chief
works.
otherwise
And
resorts,
it's
and then
just, and it's still a work in progress. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
so
That's right.
Right,
exactly.
And just like
Okay.
you said, it's so specific to the vehicle,
Right.
that you can't just say 2 years on.
Well, that was part of the issue that, with, you know, just making the blanket, well, every 18 months, it's like, that's great when we catch up to where we need to be. That could very well work, and I really think that idea of leasing a motorcycle has a lot of merit to it. And we're definitely going to explore, we explored it once before, and a lot of the data that you asked for, we did, but those figures would be probably 3 years old, 2-3 years old. So we certainly will explore that, but that could be something that helps us to catch
On the
up.
bridge, yeah.
Because it rests, it's like anything, you know, when they're going constantly, if you can rest or shuffle them around.
Yeah. So this charting stuff, which we're just starting this year, is just an attempt to have some more objective
Absolutely.
criteria,
Good
data.
stuff.
that
It
we
was a
can-
great
As long as it's
exercise,
not
great,
volume.
yeah, great exercise, and we're actually gonna take your template as a model and see if we can sort of make it an easier one to understand that would more fit our needs and our information,
Well,
so.
I, you know, it only took me 20, 25 minutes to put that together. So, you know, I'd be happy
Don't be
to
modest.
come in and sit down and say, okay, what do you want?
He's good at charts and.
I'll teach you how to shoot a pistol if you teach us how to do these charts.
Please don't teach me.
There you go.
All right.
After June.
No, before.
No, no.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for Chief? Thank you for
Thank you
putting this
very much.
together.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you
And,
again for your support and understanding. And I do have some more information coming from the Michigan State Police, which I certainly I'll forward it to Terry.
Okay, yeah, I'll get it down.
This is that magazine where a lot of those articles came out. This is the,
Yeah.
it's
What's that stand for?
Policeman
Police?
Manager. Right, it's a great magazine. If you go online, there's a lot of good information, because the people that really use this a lot have large fleets that have like 300-400 cruisers. So it's a good information packet.
Thank you, Chief.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
This was a good information package.
Take care. Thanks
Thank you,
again.
okay, have a good night.
You too. Yeah, Dave, good to see you. John, you still here?
John's here.
Oh.
Okay, so, well, I guess the question is, do we want to continue the discussion on the cruiser, or do we want to wait to see what the direction is going to be at the selectmen meeting on Thursday with regard to the cruiser?
I don't see it as a problem as us taking a vote tonight, and we're gonna be back here again, and
Plus two
if for
votes.
whatever reason,
One is whether we all agree that we need one, and then one is how we all think we should recommend paying for it, right?
Yeah, but right, yeah, I guess it's,
Let me break that up. We can, I think, this is not a separate article. So
No.
we can vote whatever we want, and the selectmen can vote whatever we want. In the end, the warrant is gonna look like whatever they want.
Right.
I don't know that the question of how we pay for this has to be settled before town meeting.
Well, it certainly does, because if it's a lease, it's $25,000 less expense in the
and it
budget.
stays in the budget. If it's a ban, it comes
Okay.
out, or it
So
stays the same.
changes everything.
Yeah, it has to be an article.
article. If it's
Yeah,
a ban,
ban, it has to be an article, so
If it's a lease,
it's a
it's
lot
not
of,
an article. If it's a ban, it's an article.
I think, my perception from what we said before was the committee, you know, a ban wasn't gonna fly with the committee, so.
No, well, so let me just, can I just make a motion? I make a motion that we approve the purchase of a police cruiser in fiscal year 15.
Second.
Can we do that without earmarking the funds?
yes,
Yes.
yeah, that's, I mean, even,
You
yeah.
are.
Because it's in the budget.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, actually, my motion said purchase. I'm going to change my motion.
Acquisition?
I move that we
But it was already
recommend the
seconded,
acquisition,
so what
yes.
do you do?
No, I voted no.
Oh.
Okay, will you take back your second?
I can-
Yeah, but
Yes,
but
I
for
can-
clarity,
Which language is it?
I
Exactly,
recommend
second, so
that we
Randy can-
support the idea, or support the inclusion of a police cruiser
In the budget.
in the budget, a new police cruiser in the budget for fiscal 15.
Second.
Does that preclude, okay, so in the
Yeah.
conversation, does that preclude it being an article not included?
Yes, it
Yes.
does.
Okay, so, inclusion of new police cruiser in the budget. And that was moved by Randy, seconded by Connie. Any discussion? Hearing none, is, all those in favor of the motion to recommend inclusion of a police cruiser in the fiscal year 2015 budget, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. So, any, those opposed? Okay.
All right, so we all support it.
Yes.
And I'm on the minority on this, but I think that we should lease it.
No, you're not. I do too.
but by default, I mean, that
Yeah.
has been taken off the table.
No, we
No, no,
would,
no.
you could lease it, it would be that 6.9,
This
so
is
let me,
how the
let's
lease-
work.
The lease doesn't require a special vote by the town.
Yeah.
All right.
Just-
Oh, that's right, yes.
Just the
that's-
borrowing does.
The reason I suggest lease over ban is because it's a small amount of money, it's a short time period, it takes an article off with debt, and for a small amount like this, I think I'm fine with paying the 6% interest, because it really doesn't amount to a heck of a lot of beans over 3 years. That's my,
And my belief is,
And it
why would we
includes-
want to incur debt, in this
we're
case?
not incurring debt.
We wouldn't incur debt.
I mean, we'd be incurring, not debt, I'm sorry, we're incurring additional cost for paying for the lease. Even
Because
though
we
you're
have-
spreading it out, I know what you're doing.
No, the
yeah.
reason is because we have better use for that third $25,000, which is to increase the snow and ice from 180 to something north of that, which history would suggest. So I'm not suggesting banking the money, I'm suggesting redeploying it with creative financing that doesn't cost the town a significant amount of money, or
In the-
a heck of a lot of money.
And the question there is, you know, once we increase the snow and ice, even if it's $25,000, that's where it's going to sit. And granted, last week I did say, you know, that, you know, obviously it's been costing us more than 180 every year for many, many years. I'm still concerned about what might happen to 117 and would like to defer the permanent increase of snow and ice.
To change the 117 is not going to do anything to being over for the past 7 years on $180,000.
Okay, I'm just expressing,
No,
yeah.
I'm just saying, I mean,
Yeah,
the difference
that's-
is, even if you call it 50, 100,000, we've still been over the majority of those years. It's, again, this is just I have a use for the money. I wouldn't give it back to the taxpayers. I wouldn't spend it on capital projects. I'd redeploy it in the budget to a better place, and we can save a little bit of money. That's the way I look at it.
Okay, so I guess,
So then 6%, assuming we went Randy's route on the lease at 6%,
That would,
that's $2,500
It's not, I think
over the
it-
course of
yeah,
3 years.
6.9%.
and a third of that would be included in the budget every year. So it would be whatever that amount we're trying to do.
And you would hope that if you could lease another one, that the repair cost would be reduced.
I'm not talking about leasing two. I'm kind of down in just one.
No, I mean,
But yeah, but,
within that time.
well, the
again,
chief's
the-
already
after
reflected
the-
that because he
the
thought
motorcycle.
he was getting Warrant. He set his repair budget flat anyway. But there could be some arguments made that that may not be true, but the data tonight suggests that it's pretty arbitrary.
Yeah.
So I've made a motion, but that's just that's how I'd like to see it paid for.
Was not originally in favor of the lease, but after reviewing the fleet at the town DPW, I'm questioning the wisdom, and there's a lot more work to be done on this. I'm questioning the wisdom of repeatedly buying used vehicles, in which case leasing might be better for new vehicles. And perhaps the town, this is a good opportunity for the town to learn about what's involved in leasing municipal vehicles. If it's a mistake, it's not going to be an expensive mistake.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And so I'm
does
not...
this fall under that same municipal lease that we were looking at for the fire? It seems like the rate's high, so.
I don't know.
I don't think-
No,
I don't think it does.
I'm not going to make any recommendation about starting to lease DPW trucks. I'm just saying, this is a good, if this turns out to be a mistake, it's going to be a cheap mistake. And we will have learned about the pitfalls of leasing municipal vehicles. I understand there will be some differences between leasing this or leasing fire equipment
Yeah.
or leasing DPW trucks.
Right.
But, you know, we're sticking our toe in the water. Again, it's an inexpensive way to learn about the process and what are the contractual obligations and things like that. So I'm not advocating that we lease every year. I think we should try it this year.
Well, to be clear, the cost, the small price to pay is just the 6% on.
6 point.
That's the only,
It's the incremental
whatever.
cost,
the-
yeah.
Yeah, okay. So if you, that's basically what you're saying, is for that cost, we can kind of put our toe in the water.
Yes.
Okay.
2,500 and change spread out over 3 years.
And not only that, but we can redeploy,
Argue
we can redeploy
that money.
the $25,000 that's currently in the budget.
Say that again, Randy.
Plus,
We can
we can, you're right, we can go all kinds of different ways, right?
Yeah.
We gave it to a lawyer. Who the hell wants to give it to a lawyer?
No.
We argued for a
I
half
know,
hour
it is it.
last week
Larry
on,
Delaney would think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
well, yeah, I know, yeah.
Oh, I mean, just to say that 2,500, are you coming up with the interest for us, David?
I'm just sort of, I don't think it's a 6% annual.
6.9, I think it was 6.9. I don't think it was
I think
6.
your calculation, Brad, was just 6%.
Over the 3 years, yeah.
And
So it's on the outstanding balance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and what I got was $3,000 of finance charges versus
2,500?
600 if you did a ban.
Yeah.
The ban is, the ban's intriguing. It just puts it on a separate article. It opens it up to
I
a
understand.
ton of debate for a small item. that
I
we should
think
be
it
able-
costs you
yeah.
about $2,400 to do a lease instead of a ban, incremental, and I think you've made fairly good arguments for doing that. I guess personally I would go with the ban, but your arguments are quite reasonable for going with a lease instead.
And I originally, to add on to what David's saying, I originally, I never even considered when you were talking about leasing the fire truck. I was like, oh my, you know, like just all of a sudden that whole idea about how bans and, you know, leases can come into play and provide newer vehicles and, you know, take care of some problems for shorter money and you know, but not knowing how it would play out in the long run was kind of like, is it, at what risk, you know?
It's short money this year.
Yeah.
It is an expense you're adding next year.
For
It's an
the-
expense you're adding this year. I mean, technically, you're paying
money this year on financing when you wouldn't have had to.
Right.
But it's short money, and I hate to say the word short money, because all money is important, but
Right.
Right.
to dip our toes into the water on some deferred payments, and then be able to, God bless you, use that money to address a pressing need, which I think we've ignored, is this 180. And still be out in the exact same spot.
Just remember that moving that money over to that account is permanent.
It's permanent,
Yeah.
and I was against it 3 years ago, but we
Okay.
have 3 more years of where it just is totally inadequate, right? I mean,
Yeah.
when are you gonna say uncle on that
Yeah.
line item?
I don't know,
Yeah.
the 25,0and is not gonna do much for it.
No, it's a starting, but
But
these are
it's-
baby steps.
I think if you tried to go bigger, I'd call it off. I'd be more worried about it, you know? So, yeah, I can see that logic.
I guess my question on that is, we're saying that the 25,000 we're not gonna spend, where we're saying the 216,000, the 25,000 we're not gonna be giving back or not taxing, but the 216,000 we are, and I just don't understand the differentiation, why?
Where's 216 from? Oh,
The
okay.
216 is has the 40 in there.
Right.
If the 40 turns into
I understand.
15, we have 25 more to be able to insulate an item that's been plaguing us,
But then why is that, yes,
and then still deal with the 216 in the way that we were theorizing with some consensus last week, which is not to spend.
I understand
Someone
that.
could make an argument that we take this 25 and we let it fall to this 216 and we
That's-
give back 240.
Right, so that's, I don't know, yes, and then leave, but I would leave, you'd have to leave some money for snow and ice.
But again, but my rationale on that is we're getting excited about this 216 as hooray, we're balanced the budget without using free cash and we're spending within our means, but we look at the budget and some may say we're high on some items, but no one can say that we're high on snow and ice.
No, it's just-
We're low on snow and ice by an egregious amount, and so everybody who's been scorekeeping some of these amounts that we've been generous, quote unquote, with other committees, we could have arbitrarily clashed those and made a very good argument to take that 100, 200 grand and just make the 180 in snow and ice 380, because we'll spend it. We've spent it every year. And so that's the difference, I think. Is the 216 is not, we shouldn't feel good about the 216.
Well, we
With
didn't
100
transfer any
million.
snow and ice in 2012,
Yeah.
so it's not every year. And it varies quite a bit. I think there's so many, obviously, we're gonna cover it anyway, we're gonna have to cover it. So, but to make that step, that 25,000, which seems very arbitrary.
We're getting preoccupied
Yeah,
on the
with how to
second
use
point.
it.
Right, yeah, can we get back to that?
We gotta
Well,
get
but
back to
it's-
the lease question.
All right, I make a motion that we,
Urge the selectmen,
we don't, we're setting the budget. I make a motion that we include, with relation to the purchase of a police, or with relation to the acquisition of a police cruiser in fiscal 15, that we enter into a 3-year lease for such cruiser and reflect the savings in the operating budget that results from that, from
And the-
today to
And the cost
set
of the
new
lease.
structure.
And
Correct.
the cost of the lease, which would be a separate line.
No, it would be all in one, when we put lease motorcycle in a couple of years ago, it was the payment that we would make
Okay.
yeah, it's just,
in
it's just,
principal and interest all in one
Yeah.
line.
I'll second that.
I guess the thing is, if, next year on the budget, when the police cruiser shows up again, it's gonna be 52,000, right? Because it's gonna be 40,000 or something for a new one and
Unless,
12,000.
or Vin has a year under his belt with the lease, thinks it's fine,
He's
and
got a
it's
motorcycle.
30,000 next year,
All right.
and we've even saved ourselves next year.
Okay.
It's 30,000 because you double the lease.
It's the
Because-
second payment of the first lease and the first payment of
Of
the
the new
second,
lease.
of the new.
Yeah, okay, got it.
It's still less than 40,000. I mean, that's the way I look at
And if it's
it.
bad, then
And then he stops, and then the Bob's
And he
point,
may
then
not
it
even
costs.
we've
get
gotta
one, he might be at a
reassess.
motorcycle.
So that's the risk.
Then you've got a, then you have the pig going through the python.
Yeah, I got it.
Right, so, you second it?
Connie seconded. Any more discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That's me. Not just that I'm saying no, but I'm voting no.
All right, now, this is something that the selectmen should be asked to address at their Thursday meeting.
I'll get the message to Don.
And if they address it, I would like them to think about it in the two components, which is the $25,000 savings goes to increase snow and ice. So I wonder if I make that motion now too. I don't know.
Can you earmark that?
Yeah, we
Well, we
can.
just would increase the
Just
budget
saying.
by $25,000.
I think it's time. I'll make a motion that we increase
Well,
the snow and ice.
I would only do that if the lease goes through.
Okay, I will make a motion that contingent on the approval of the police cruiser lease, that we take such proceeds estimated to be $25,000, and we increase snow and ice in the fiscal 15 budget from $180,000 to $205,000.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
And then the 205 is in there for good.
Forever. The last time we set the 180 was, God, I mean, it had to have been 10 years ago. And we've been fearful. I've been fearful.
Yeah, no, I remember the conversation last, because I was trying to understand it last year, and you guys explained it to me,
But what do
and
we
why
do?
it was part of, why it's been
There's
specifically
almost no
kept
chance
above.
it's gonna go down.
Yeah.
Even with increases and all.
No.
No.
No,
It's
no,
snow and
leases,
ice,
I'm
the
thinking
snow
of
and ice.
DPW people
Yeah.
and,
Oh.
you know, that kind of.
There's almost no chance it's
Okay.
gonna go down.
And that, you've done a lot of research on that.
I've done some research.
Okay.
A lot.
'Cause that's a big.
David?
It was only 2 or 3 years ago where we didn't need anything.
2 years ago,
more.
2012.
Yeah, we didn't
Yeah.
need
But that was the
any.
one outlier out of 7 years,
Well,
though.
but there's been some smaller numbers.
Yeah, and why you want to increase people's taxes when you've got an opportunity here not to? In other words, if you keep the budget where it is and you save the 25,000 or whatever you're saving on the cruiser, why not let people's taxes go down in this environment?
Well, we figured that since everything was quiet on your front this past week, we wanted to give you something to write.
I sent a letter to the papers this week
Oh,
rather than
Well,
send
I
out
think to
emails.
that point, Dave, I think if we have consensus at some point on this 216, that's a good start too.
I'm sorry?
If we get consensus at some point on this 216 not being spent and not raising to the levy limit, that's also a good step too.
It's certainly
I don't know, I just,
It's certainly better than not doing it, I agree.
Hey, you know, I just think it's, again, in order to start feeling good about where we are, we have to have a lot of confidence in this top number. And, you know, we can look for ups and downs, but one of the glaring downs, it's killing us this year, killed us last year, killed us 4 years ago, is this 180. Julie perpetually has angst trying to cover it. We have this extra 100,000 outside the budget that we've been trying to get rid of, but the reason we don't get rid of it is because we're not comfortable with the 180. It's like all roads point back to, we're not comfortable with the 180.
But your budget really is 280.
I understand, but. so
And the 280.
And it hasn't averaged
no,
that
it's
much
not.
more than
It's not,
280.
it's not too.
Well, okay, I know your budget isn't, but your assumption is that you're gonna have an average of 280.
But
And it hasn't been, if you look at the last
Well,
5 years, it hasn't been that different.
Yeah, we
We
didn't
hold
use it
this
last year.
100 hostage from free cash every year because, why? Because we're not comfortable in the 180. So it's just a shell game. So I'm not saying we keep the 100. If we put 25 in the operating budget, then maybe the 100 this year comes down to 75. Who knows? And we're still getting, you know, the whole goal here is to get the operating budget and the amounts that we have on the spreadsheet to be fair, reasonable, and accurate. We cannot say that about 180,000. It's no.
well, but it's,
No,
it's
but-
impossible to predict the,
Yeah, but the snow and ice is not something you can ever adjust downward. You can't go to them like you can to the library and say, we're gonna cut your budget.
so if you don't use the 100, you can use it somewhere else.
Well,
Well, we don't have to raise.
what happens, yeah, what happens is
Still.
people don't get taxed for the 100.
Right, we don't, the
I know
assessors
that.
use that as the first thing. But then again, I mean, hey, flip
You still
side
gotta
is, if you
tax
don't
for the
need,
280, I
if you
mean-
don't need the 25 in the budget for a particular year, it just rolls to free cash and can be used for something else the next year.
But you're
Bob, to your
taxable.
point, with us,
Yeah.
you still, if we raise it, we still have to tax to get it.
No, I know that. I know
I mean,
that.
so
And
what's the difference?
my opinion is just that, you know, raising it to 205 is, you're gonna spend it every year. That's the only reason. I'm not trying to get clever on the tax rate or stuff like that.
I'm not either.
I think you're gonna spend it every year.
Trying to put the operating budget actually in line with what we expect.
And if you don't spend it,
Then it rolls to free cash.
Just
To
like any-
David's point, it gets taxed, and it's an item that gets taxed, it doesn't get used that year.
okay.
And then you get to use that 25,000 for a capital project next year
Got it.
because we've had this unofficial policy of using free cash for capital.
You got me nervous all of a sudden. I'm like, well, where does it,
No, you don't
where does
lose
it
it.
go? It does stay in Bolton, it just gets reallocated.
Yeah. So,
Okay, so we have a a motion to, I'm not gonna repeat exactly, so I don't remember it all, but,
Contingent on
contingent on
lease.
the
Board of Selectmen.
Board of Selectmen approving or the, leasing the vehicle, the police cruiser. The motion is to increase snow and ice by $25,000,
Or,
by approximately $25,000 for fiscal year 2015.
how about I reword it, by the savings between the 40,000 that's in the budget now for a new cruiser and the expected amount.
There's no way I'm gonna remember it all. Okay,
But I don't want to lock it into 25, it's about 25.
I said approximately. Do you want,
It's hard to do an approximate motion, honestly.
But
We've never done one before.
well, we're gonna watch it.
Concept.
Okay.
You know, it's easier to just do the 25,000.
Yeah, it is close enough.
Probably easier to do the 25,000 than to have this number
Yeah, you're not-
floating.
You're not gonna be off by
Round it
more
off.
than $1,500 at the outside.
Okay. Want to keep it 25?
Sure.
Okay, and that's been
Seconded by
Approved.
by Bob, seconded by Bob. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No?
No.
But for different reasons.
Well, we don't know. Well, maybe.
What was that? What was the count there? I didn't hear.
4 to 2. Okay. So, are we ready to talk? Well, it's 9:45, so you guys tell me what you want to do. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about. Do you want to, at a minimum, go over the sander? Because you talked to
yeah,
about the repairs and stuff.
I went to see Harold about the Sanders, and it's 6 vehicles that we're talking about.
Oh, 6
That
vehicles?
need
Oh,
repairs,
wow.
yes.
This 72,000 will be spread over 6 years.
I'm sorry. But I can't talk about anything below here unless I know how much money we have to allocate. And I don't know how much money we have to allocate because I don't agree with this $150,000.
Okay. And
I'm going to want to defer that until we have Julie back, and she'll be back next week. Well,
For what?
Because using her experience,
Julie's
and,
not a voting member on this committee.
no, but we have asked her for her opinion and her,
She gave it the other night. I know exactly what it is when we talked about this.
Can you
last week.
repeat it? Because I haven't
Julie's
seen it.
for any of this because she doesn't think that she can find the money that she would need this year to cover the deficit that we're currently running. And my argument to that is we found 200,000+ the year before. I was the chairman when we prepared the fiscal 14 budget, and I can say for sure, and many people at this table can say that we did not cut the budget from 14 to 13 in any material way that would make me believe that we wouldn't have a similar amount to cover this year. And so I think squirreling away another 150 of free cash to cover a deficit that I don't believe we'll need to dip into to cover is impairing our ability to do or to think about some of these capital items.
And while those are valid points, it has nothing to do with this particular article, just whether or not we're going to vote on it.
I'm just, at some point we need to address it, yes.
Okay, so this is spread over 6 vehicles. And, you go up there and, I can kick the tires and I can pick the rust out under the bodies, but I'm not gonna climb in the engines to see whether or not the electrical harness really needs to be replaced.
I don't even know what an electrical harness is.
And Harold said to me, he's got one of these mega trucks in there, and he says, and the pistons that lift this thing up to the side when we load it, if we do that, you can see that these particular beams underneath need work and all that stuff. And he says, do you want to see that? I said, well, it'd be interesting. He goes,
Yeah.
well, it's loaded with sand and salt right now. Do you really want me to go empty it? So he's got these trucks loaded with sand and salt, ready to go in there. And I got it. He had his list of truck by truck of what the specific issues were and what was exterior he could point out to me and stuff like that. The sad part is, this does not buy you 5 years more use on those trucks, not any of them. It doesn't buy you 3 years more use on those trucks. Maybe it buys you 2 more years use on those trucks before they're gonna need more repairs. He's already used $50,000 of the sand and salt.
To repair?
The overspend to repair trucks just so they can stay on the road.
It's kind of the same case as the police cars, right? Don't put so much money into something that has no value.
I don't think you could sell these trucks.
This is for 7 trucks, you said?
6, yeah.
6.
So it's not,
Yeah, I mean, I was in favor of it last week. It's
Well,
number one on
it
capital
just-
planning's.
I know, it just seemed like.
So you were surprised by this, Bob? Because if I remember, you were against this last week.
Yeah,
You wanted to
see that.
I thought it was, I thought it was a couple of trucks, and I didn't know what it was gonna buy.
So why aren't these repairs being, handled in the normal course of his budget? Because it has repairs. Is it just that
He spends that money already.
I know, but did these repairs that are not normal kind of repairs, or?
Well, these are repairs, the sand and salt trucks only get used
So this is,
5 months.
again, the
5 months of the year, right? And he goes through, like, the chains are several $1,000s each, and he goes through several sets of chains for each truck each year. And then, you can see it happening, the trucks, the tires, they have the double tires on the back.
Yeah.
Well, the tires with the chains on them are all chewed up. And the tire right next to it, which is the same make, model, and put on at the same time, is almost pristine. So you need the chains, but they chew up the tires, and then you gotta replace the tires sooner, right? Now, he's working on a remedy for that, which is a different kind of tire, and then he'd only have to put on chains with, when there's ice on the road. But, even the chains that you buy now, the chains rust. Which is unbelievable to me that they would sell tire chains for salt trucks that aren't salt resistant. But, this is, part of the issue is it's public bid. He can't go out and get the best quality stuff. He's got to go get the cheapest stuff that qualifies. He's got you've seen those 4x8 girder racks? He's got one shelf of those things with just bags of chains on them too deep. And
New
he'll-
chains?
yeah.
This
Yeah.
situation is also a function of, over the past 2 times he's had a sander on the warrant.
He's pulled them, or?
He's
pulled them.
either pulled it or he's gone to a used, right? I mean, to get, so that's just
I don't-
adding to the,
I don't know the last time we bought a new truck for
yeah,
DPW.
I don't know either, I don't,
We got in
He's
the
pulling
habit.
them, yeah.
Yeah, we got in the habit, and to me, you're just buying someone else's problem. But anyway, if you don't spend this money, what happens? You've got trucks that you may not be able to put out there. Probably you finish out this winter, but early next year, you're not going to be able to get all the whole fleet out there. You're going to be spreading, you'll be using next year's sand and ice deficit to fund these repairs.
yeah, so this number is so thin, because you're saying he already went to sand and ice with 50 grand.
Yeah.
So so when you were saying, so this number, you're also saying you're not sure it even buys 3, and that relative to the
3
conversation.
years.
Yeah, 3 years, and that relative to the conversation of entertaining the idea of moving the whole the
Outsourcing.
fleet to an
Outsource.
outsourced environment.
You
Walk
can't-
us through that bridge.
Okay, you can't do that all at once, right?
Obviously, yeah.
Right, so, as you do that, and this is not a plan that I've ever discussed, this transition is speculative on my part.
Sure.
It's not something I've discussed with Harold, so no one should go to Harold and say,
When are you
but
starting?
advisory, Bob said this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's speculative on my part. But as you make that transition, you'll be using your own trucks less, you'll be using them fewer hours per day, and maybe you don't need as many of them because you've got a fleet big enough. But that depends on, you've got to have a bunch of qualified people out there with their own equipment who can handle your roads.
Are these all of the vehicles that he has for snow? That's 6, is that the number, or do we have 10?
He's actually got 7.
He's got 7.
One of
Well,
them
what we're
doesn't.
voting tonight is for fiscal 15 winter. Harold's not
Yes,
gonna
for
get
15.
a new operational structure in place between now and
No.
then, right?
Yeah, no, I was just trying to understand. I know.
What happens beyond 15?
Exactly.
What's his
And I
buying
know
beyond
we
15?
spend it, we are going long nights, and I'm asking questions for future years, so I know.
Just
Yeah.
put it up.
So,
Yeah.
you're gonna spend this money. It's just, and you know what, you're gonna spend it in 15. It's just, do you want it to be part of the snow or ice deficit, or do you want to take the free cash that you have now and put it out there? That's how I view the situation right now. It's a big nut, it's painful because you're basically gonna consume it in a year. You're not gonna get more than a year or 18 months worth of benefit from it.
Let's throw it.
It begs the question of, what's the long-term
Do
solution?
that.
But,
We need to.
it's stuff that's gotta be done.
Yes,
Yeah.
have to have.
What you offered to the police and what you gave them and what appears to be something that they really like, and even coming up with a new data point that we talked about tonight, I would think that same exercise would be wonderful.
It's completely applicable to the DPW.
Yeah.
And now that one department has accepted it, it's easier to get another department to accept it.
So you're saying you're gonna go back to Harold and talk to him about these 6 vehicles and put him on
Well,
have him
I think I'll talk to Mr. Lowe about the possibility of extending the use of that spreadsheet to a couple other departments and see how that flies.
But that doesn't help
But-
us at this moment.
No, we're not gonna get this data at this moment.
Shelley should be able to easily do that.
Yeah, Shelley's been smoothly key.
Okay.
She's got it all.
But, I,
Real good.
at this point, I don't think it would make any difference in my decision. I don't think I'd sit there and say, do this truck and don't do that truck. I mean, I've got a
You
couple.
saw all those trucks and they were.
Yeah, I've got a couple of things I want to go talk to Chief Alfano about. Why are you working on this car? Why are you dumping this car and not the other one? But, again,
Train wreck.
it was, there's just a lot of little crap that needs to be done to these trucks.
Can I make a motion?
Well,
Well, you want-
no, we can't make a motion because we've got to do this whole thing in totality.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna
But-
ask if you talked to him about the culverts.
But that's, no, but I can talk about the culverts. I don't have to talk to him about that. 'cause
So we're still-
I've already done that.
So if you want to, in order to get things moving or deferred, is the $150,000 is critical. Though, let me just point out some other approach, which may or may not, nobody might like it, is that both the culverts and the rescue equipment we could finance them with a ban, which is low cost, and still have, and be able to do it, and pull them out of this, not use free cash for them, and
Yeah, but you're putting them in the operating budget with the ban, though. You're putting the future cost of this all in the operating budget.
Not
And then it
till
has to be
fiscal
voted on.
16.
Right.
yeah.
Well, why would we,
Well, it's just another alternative. I don't know if 150 may be way too big, but I don't think 0 is the right number
Yeah.
either. So that's
Once again, what you do with this other stuff is independent of the question of should that number be 150 or some other number.
Okay. And then the decision on how you get the, where you find the money, if it's 150 or if it's 75 or
Once you
0.
agree on that number, then you start talking about what you push out. Do you push out the payment, or do you push out the acquisition?
Right, okay. So, that's where we are. Is there another number, or is there a motion, or how do you want to handle this? I don't, everybody knows where I stand, so.
You don't know where you stand?
I know I said everybody knows where I stand, so. I mean, I don't think 150 is the number, but I don't think 0 is, so I would have a hard time, or now it's 25.
so let's just talk about that. Why do you think we need any? How have you become convinced that we need any?
Because I think, I wasn't here last year, but I think there were changes to the budget and some tightening up, and we don't have, if you look at what free cash is, which I have somewhere, the turnaround's going to be very different. Last year we had,
Every year.
right, but we know already what the current year deficits are going to turn around. And last year it was a big number, that we had the huge number of the Chapter 90 and FEMA and all of this that totaled a couple, 200,000. This year we have $50,000 that's going to turn around.
I would just
And then
suggest, we did the exact same exercise last year, thought we were in a good spot, and free cash replenished at $1.2 million.
I don't know, did we, I don't think that detail was here,
Yes,
because
sir.
people were not certain what these deficits and these turnarounds were.
Yeah, no, we had that detail.
Good.
Well, but it can't be all from, I mean, the difference here is 113 of unencumbered. That's, and then the local receipts. Now, so the question is,
We
was
didn't
anything?
chop local receipts up like we did this year, last year.
Anything at all?
We moved it, but we didn't move it to anywhere near the level we just moved it to for 15. There's a lot of moving pieces to free cash. I'm not going to say that there isn't. I'm just saying that the notion that we cut more to the bone in 14 than we did in 13 is, I can say.
We didn't do much
did not.
cutting in expenses.
We didn't.
We increased our revenue projection substantially, but we really didn't cut much
Well, so
expenses.
this
I mean, if you
returned
look-
a large 200.
Anything we
If you look at the cover sheet of your
Right.
budget, I think you'll see expenses went up. Then you had the school go up, you had the 2% increase in all the salaries and wages, and we didn't cut any non-wage expenses substantially. We mean, $50 here, 100, 500 there. That's
So how
about
much
it.
of the local receipts that came back last year, 209,000, would you expect to be different?
I expect that to be half of what it was last year.
We only increased excise taxes last year. Remember, I argued with Julie to put 25,000 or something more in it. I mean, it wasn't in the magnitude of 100.
I'm thinking if we increased it 90 for 15. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no, the 15 was
Okay.
80 for 15.
Okay.
You said 50, yeah, no.
No, that's going to be about the same.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to predict.
It is hard to predict.
What I would say, though, is that granted, listen, Julie's not here, she's not here to defend herself, she can watch the meeting, but last year, Julie hemmed and hawed that she wasn't, under any circumstances, gonna be able to find the deficit last year.
We found it,
And
I
she
know.
found it.
Yeah.
With 100,
With 1,000 to go.
with 100 to spare, yeah.
And the deficit last year was pretty deep. The deficit this year is pretty deep. I don't see much difference between 14 and 13 to squirrel away anywhere near 150,000.
No, so the 150 may not be the numbers. So we're at 275, so we're,
And I would argue that the 250 in free, like, if we to zero, the 250 in free cash, we've never even, I mean, it's late already, we've never this year even debated the 250.
well, But that's to cover, that's a whole nother thing, that's to cover the warrants and the payment of debt and,
That's right.
yeah, so that we don't,
Every year, we have a discussion on what the right target for the year is. I'm just saying, we haven't this year. It used to be 500, used to be 7, I mean, it used to be a lot. When we whittled it down, we thought 250 was a good number last year, and again, 1.2 million, right? I'm just saying, so if you, to get some comfort, I mean, I'm not flying blind here. I've had enough experience at this to know that I feel comfortable taking the 150 down to 0 and leaving the 250 as is. And if the 250, we have to eat into that 50 grand, what's the big deal if it's 200,000? It's not a big deal at all. We're never gonna replenish free cash next year of $200,000. There's not a chance in the world. It will be, if we all want to put bets on it tonight, it will be $500,000 next year. And that's the thing, that's what we always miss. So we're sensitive to numbers we put on a paper because we have to, I understand that, but there's debate abound on a lot of these numbers, and we haven't had them. But that's why, another reason why I feel comfortable with removing the 150 to 0. I'm fine with leaving the 250 because it's a better number than anything else, but I just don't think we should be scared about being able to cover it. And we have a mechanism if we can't. That extra 100,000 is there for a reason.
well, that's, yeah, well, that was covering that's why it's not 250,000, 275. I mean, we have it, we have the 100.
So even with that discussion, I'm not opposed to getting rid of the 150 or even leaving it on. I think if it's critical that we wait for Julie, I still think we can knock out a couple of these articles tonight and then worry about that later. Because my concern is, if I heard correctly earlier this evening, there's going to be some folks that aren't going to be around for next week. And I think we're getting down to,
The reason the discussion's important is because we're certain that the fire truck and the town vault are going to be on the warrant, which means we have to cover $586,000, right? And that leaves you with just $100,000 of free cash to
Well,
play
that's
with.
assuming that we pay with the fire truck with cash.
Yes.
exactly. And so to go on the discussion that Randy brought up earlier this evening about the concern on, a ban and having to explain it on the town floor. I'm okay with that, because I think yes, it's going to be more difficult, and yes, there's going to be a lot of folks that, don't get it, but I think it is the education process, and I think we shouldn't be afraid to educate the folks on town floor about why if we go down that road, why we would be using a ban on something.
But unfortunately, there's so many moving pieces, right? So follow that argument. We argue for a ban, and then what are we going to do with the 500,000 in free cash over and above our 250 target? If there's no good use for it, you got to do something. You have to, if you're going to convince a taxpayer he should borrow for something, you got to tell him why. And it's hard to tell him why when you're sitting with $500,000 of cash you got no use for, and then he's going to say, well, give it back to me.
No, you're absolutely right, and so that's why I'm not looking as an all or nothing on that. I'm looking as a combo, so as to build and therefore take care of what we want to take care of, and also account for the possibility of what might be said on town floor. So,
Where do you think free cash is going to come in?
Easily $500,000.
Okay, so what do you need that $150,000 for?
I don't think we do, but
Okay.
in the context of furthering the discussion, it's already 10. If I heard correctly, we're not going to have a full committee in the coming weeks.
Right.
And I think this is important, and I would prefer to have a full committee when we're going through this. So I would like to try and knock some of these out, as opposed to waiting around for Julie. That's all.
I'm not.
I don't think anybody's proposing to wait. It was put out there as a suggestion. I don't think that's gonna.
I don't think I don't know what she's gonna say that she hasn't already said. So.
What you just said about, can you just clarify, you were saying it's not an all or nothing, but you were thinking, how were you thinking
No,
about
'cause-
approaching the town with the fire trucks expense?
Pay as much as we can for cash, depending upon what
What everything else falls in?
Yeah, so I don't know, I mean,
And then for the rest of the band?
Without
pick,
150.
pick a number, 300,000 in cash, and we do a $250,000 band.
37,866.
I don't know.
Oh, you got enough, I mean,
Yeah, well, that's the math I did last week,
Yeah.
guys, was that if you take up 108,866
less.
less 250, you're left with 837,866.
And we have right now,
And if we have the culvert, the rescue equipment, the fire truck,
we have
the
850, yeah.
sander, the pedestrian thing, and the school, all that adds up to 784,929. You add the 30,000 for the vault, and you're at like
And you're taking it.
810, and you still have $22,000 left, assuming that all that gets paid for with cash. So everything that we haven't decided on, we whittled the list down, but everything, actually, I didn't include the library.
you're more
cameras.
informed.
Just about
Yeah,
that.
we should know on Wednesday, we'll know before, we'll know before
You kind of already
the,
know.
well, I know that's what you're saying, but we'll know for
Oh,
sure.
the library stuff, but I'm saying the town hall cameras, we kind of consensus talked, we didn't have any votes about it, but
No.
we all, I think I was the only, it was my idea, but I was the only one that supported it.
Yeah,
I
we
think,
do what Don
You know, I
had to
mean,
say.
that's, Don said kind of what I was trying to do.
I would do
last
town
week.
hall, but I agree with David about the library.
But granted, even if we gotta eat into this 22 with another 17, you have, the point is that if you eliminate the 150, you have 800 and almost 40 grand of free cash to spend or appropriate, and everything that's left on the list would fit within that. And so if you're saying, Brad, that you would only consider a ban for the fire truck if we didn't have the cash, I mean,
We have the cash.
unequivocally, we have the cash. It's just also the thing that's missing now from Terry's sheet is any amount for
Yeah,
a
because I
tax.
just took it out because I left the line there because we don't know what that number would be.
But then one
But
could
we
say
have,
we're
we're
giving
giving them
the
$200,000,
The 200.
what would be 200. So.
Of course, the ambulance is from the receipts,
Right.
plus,
you know,
but that's not all the receipts. How
So
much
you
do we
can
say?
kind
we
of
have
have
it.
it,
We have the
take it
coverage.
easy too. Although I think this, I mean, I don't know,
What's that? The 150?
no.
I mean,
it's
I
not-
see the 250 there, but I-
216?
Yeah,
Not 216, if we just voted, it would stay
It stays
216,
216.
yeah. David?
This will come as no surprise, but I think you ought to do a ban for the whole of the fire truck, 7 years, and give 500,000 of tax relief as you originally had in your sheet
see, and I'm at
until
5.
recently.
That was just a number that was never funded.
Okay, it was an idea. I put it out in the beginning as
But-
an amount like the fire truck,
But
just for convenience.
whether it was in there or not, I think that's what you should do. I mean, and
That was my
it's
idea.
good accounting too, because you finance things over
I
a
just really
conservative
cannot
estimate of
borrow
their
to-
average
to-
life.
yeah.
And I just think that
What
would be
was
the way to go.
the interest on the 5-year ban? That wasn't 2,000.
32,000, I think.
How much?
32,000?
No, it was less
Yeah,
than that.
no, it was 32,000, I'm pretty sure.
Put in 500,000, that's about right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not a 7-year ban on the truck? I mean, it's got probably a 30-year,
It might have
20-year
been a
life.
7-year, I have it here. But let's get back, I think Randy's right, that the key is the 150 or whatever the
Well,
number
it's just
is.
cleaner to
Yeah.
have a starting point, right?
Yeah, no, I think, no, I'm agreeing with you, just accept that.
I'm not-
But,
I have a
um,
win there.
But no, I think we need to make that decision before we go on. And so, I don't think we need anything on this. This is just a decision that we would be making.
Well, is there a consensus?
That's what, I mean, the consensus
I
that
don't
we
know
need.
if there's a consensus.
Do you have that information on the?
Yes, I do, yes, I do.
On the what?
The ban.
Well, are we talking about the 150? or
No,
the-
I have, I think I
she
have.
started to do that before.
Well, I don't do anything to it. Why don't I just throw out a motion and see
They
what
just,
goes?
does she want-
Do I need to move to change the spread? I don't know.
I don't think we, okay,
I
so,
think to get a permanent
No.
sense of the committee, we need a motion.
so there's just a second, 1, 2, 3, 4. So on the 7-year band, it was $33,000.
And the 5-year was,
5-year, 21.
okay, that's what I thought.
Okay.
I want to make a motion that we remove the $150,000 of snow and ice deficit from the spreadsheet dated March 18th, 2014.
I'll second that.
We actually need to make a motion.
That's why I just asked, but Bob said I thought it was cleaner.
Oh.
So I deferred to the gentleman from...
And can you just, in like layman's new person terms, can you do one more, thanks, one more?
So we put this on there, Terry put this on there with the foresight that we were running over in snow and ice. Remember, we had this 180 in the budget forever, and we've spent, and you've been here when we've authorized overspend.
Yep.
The mechanism for overspend is, well, the thought on overspend is that at the end of the year, Julie Costello, our accountant, goes and she looks at items from the budget that she can move to cover the deficit, unexpended items from different departments.
Okay.
The only valid argument that Julie, in my opinion, made was that she's capped at 5% or whatever of each department. But that didn't stop us last year from covering a like deficit with unexpended items from the budget. And therefore, we extinguished at the end of the fiscal year last year the deficit that we had.
Can I just ask, so the 192,000 from last year
You know,
was not net of the 100?
no, it was
The
no,
whole.
it was the whole thing, because we didn't need to use
It's
the
100. So this year, the whole thing is 275 at this point.
Yeah.
So it's another,
But to Bob's point, we found
80,000.
192 with 100 to spare.
we don't know if we could have used it all, only because of the 5%
Of the 5%.
limitation. We don't know.
So
We don't know.
that might prove some challenges, but there's a stopgap in place. That's when the 100 would come into play.
Right, so that's what I was asking, so the 192
That's hard
was
to
the whole
quantify.
number,
Yeah.
yeah. So we do have the 100.
Mhm. No, 192 was the whole deficit last year, over the 180.
No, your stopgap was, we have
Was
the
the
100.
We have
always had the
Our
100.
advisory 100.
Yeah.
No, not our, no, I'm
There's
right here.
another 100 that you may not be aware of that covers
This
180.
100.
All right, fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So that's,
essentially-
yes.
Can I say, Terry?
Yes, this 100.
So essentially, we squirrel away another 100
Oh,
free
okay,
cash.
yes.
No, what this is for,
The de facto snow budget is
what
2.
that is for
It's
is,
280.
if you run
Or
a
now,
snow and ice deficit.
some other
it's
district.
14.
So, okay,
You can't cover
280,
it.
and we're at, which I have, so the 150 was. So we have to cover
Absolutely
170.
State mandates
Getting rid of
that
that
be paid
150 now.
before
So we
anything else.
really have to cover 175.
But that extra 100 has some
So if we don't
pitfalls,
have that
right?
there,
It's tax
and we-
capacity that
and we
the
can't pay
assessors
things,
looked
then
to
we
see if
gotta
we
go back and
needed.
cut our
This
budget.
year, they looked, we
So
didn't
we
need it, so
always
they
leave
technically don't
$100,000 of tax
try to
capacity
raise
on
that
the
if they
table.
don't have to, when they haven't had to,
So-
because we've been able to cover it in the operating budget. So said another way, the 180
Thank
has
you.
proved to be right for us because we've had 180 of overages in other places, and the de facto snow and ice in the budget last year was 360.
380, whatever.
Because we had fluff, if you will, in other
Steven.
parts of the budget. And so, Stasha, so I
Sorry.
hope that's not layman's, but
Right.
we were able last year to cover our deficit of almost 200 grand
I
with
think
money.
fluff isn't,
No, I
yeah,
didn't
you're
mean to
only,
say
yeah,
fluff,
because it's, everybody does their best job to come up with the
That's a bad
budget.
word for
Yeah,
me.
so
Not
not
fluff.
over expenditure, you know, I mean, under expended,
Last year, we were able to
unexpended
come up
funds.
with 200 grand of overage from other areas of the budget that we didn't spend. And
Unexpended.
I
Or
see no
unexpended funds is the.
unexpended
funds,
items
yeah.
from a hodgepodge of departments. And so
200, you said?
We came at 192,000,
Okay,
yeah.
192, got it.
So,
So what's the
And-
5%? She
she can
cannot,
only take, if Don Lowe's selectman budget is under by $10,000, she can only take 500 of it, I guess, in that case, right? I don't know. She can only transfer
Up
a
to-
state maximum out of every department or something.
there's $5,000 or
$5,000 or
5%.
whichever's
Yours
greater.
higher. So I think that,
Selectmen can do transfers in the last 2 months too, so
Right,
They're
so,
never
so
gonna- we're never
it
gonna see
could
that.
skirt her math
Yeah.
in a positive way if we ever found ourselves in a tight
Dire
situation, which is why again, Julie made a good argument, but what she forgot to tell you is that there's other ways around it that we just typically haven't used. So
But
that's
I think
get a
the
heads
big
up
piece is the
before.
100,000.
If we're gonna get close,
the big piece,
we're
but
gonna know.
also it's
We'll start
certain
moving that stuff.
Before town meeting, what
Yeah.
that final
David's
number.
point, the selectmen
Okay.
can move money around at the
So
end of
this-
the year and make it easier for her.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah. So they'll do that accounting, if it's not needed, they'll.
There's some limit, but they could do, say, 5% into a
There's-
a budget that has some room already.
Yeah.
And then Julie's 5% becomes a larger number, because
There's a creative way to get around almost
Well,
everything.
yeah.
We may be wrong in our.
Okay,
So that's the reason why I think that it's,
I get
and what it's doing is it allows us to see clearer what we have money to spend on. And I know the snow and ice budget causes me angst too. It's big, it's bigger than we've seen it in a long time, but I still feel pretty good that we can find a way to cover it without hitting ourselves this year for it.
we have to feel darn good, because otherwise,
Well, it's hard
It
to
was a big
say.
year, so it's sort of, I'm just having a hard time with it.
If you judge history, we
Harold,
will be
one of the
just,
things Harold mentioned to me is he's never been out more days than this year.
yeah, I think this is a big year. And we don't know if, we could still end up with some more. I mean, because he had wanted to come in with 50. So I'll end up voting no on this. Not that I'm totally, because I could think the 150 could be lower, but I probably want something in there, whether it's 50,000 or something else.
Could we
So-
vote that?
Well, no, we have a motion on the table.
Oh, sorry.
So that's my thinking on it. So we probably talked about this. Anybody else have any comments on it? Okay, so Randy's motion is to remove the 150 snow and ice deficit reserve that's sitting on this spreadsheet, March 18th, 2014. Bob seconded. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And all opposed? No.
No.
Is this for the same reason or not? I just have to ask you because you said we voted no.
Yeah.
I don't understand
Mine
Connie's
was wrong,
reason.
I don't either.
Okay, so that's gone.
I don't understand Connie's, and I think yours is wrong.
It's okay, David. I think that that's probably a given that you and I are going to be opposite. Okay, so now we have
Sorry.
837,866
Right.
to spend. We have 859,28 with, if you look at the second line from the bottom, that's everything. That includes 28,000 of the old fire station, which I have a really hard time believing is going to stay there. So that we would have enough to cover everything, I think.
Well,
With free cash, if that's what we choose to do.
I think,
Right.
except the library, we've got an indication that the library trustees may not.
May
fund.
not. But even so what's the
It's
850
higher by 10,370. 859.28 minus 28,000.
is what? Is, is 822,928, right? And then we'd have to add in 10,000, so it's still 832 for just, we have $5,000.
Well, do we not have a hotline into a trustee so as to find out what the answer is?
Tomorrow's the meeting.
Today's the 18th.
833,298.
Right, what happened? I think when is the meeting, today or tomorrow?
I thought she was going to a meeting tonight.
No, you're right, it's the 18th, but I thought the 18th was tomorrow, so that's,
I don't-
even though it says right
No,
here,
Yesterday was St.
18th.
Patrick's Day.
Well, I'm still wearing my green today, that's what's messed
Well,
me
that's
up.
because you got so hungover, you didn't shoot your clothes.
All that Guinness. Okay,
So 837,866 on the top line and 833,298 of expense.
yeah,
Backing out to 28 and backing out to 10,370.
okay,
And you're adding back the 10,370.
That's what we're backing out, we're adding back. Yep.
whatever. So we have enough in free cash to cover everything. And we'll find out what the library situation is. Set me. Okay, so we can, so do we want to address whether do we need to make the decision as we go through each one of these items as to how we're going to fund it? Or do we, well, we did kind of the, how do you like the capital item last week, but we can do that again. So do we need to go through how we're gonna fund it, or just vote on them, the articles as they stand now and figure
My
out
thought
the
is
funding?
let's vote on them, and then from there, see.
Well, it affects the wording of the article if you're gonna borrow.
Yeah.
So you want to hit the elephant in the room first?
The fire apparatus, okay. So,
Poor John Menzer left 20 minutes left early.
yeah.
Because it hinges on that, right?
Well, or we can ban other items.
Well-
We don't have, if we choose,
No.
we don't, it doesn't have to be the fire
If you
apparatus.
borrow, it's gonna be because you wanna borrow.
I don't want to borrow, so.
No, well, no,
Yeah.
my point is, you've got enough cash to pay for everything.
That's right, now we
So-
have enough cash, so.
So
Right,
if
that's
you're
very
gonna,
interesting
so, you know, now it's two separate questions.
If
Is
you're
it
gonna-
worth getting, and do we wanna borrow for it?
Right,
Right, and my linkage is, if we have enough cash to pay for everything, and we talk about borrowing, the only reason we're talking about borrowing is to give money back to the taxpayers.
right. And
So then, in that case, we have to wrestle that one to the ground first.
David, with your handy calculator there, because you're so good at this and you know all it. 216,421 of unused tax levy, what is the effect on the, either the tax rate or the average taxpayer, or how, maybe give us both numbers.
Was it 216,
421,
421?
but that stays the same, right? Yeah,
I mean, that's where it is today.
yeah, and that was after.
Equals. That's 110 a house roughly. Now, the impact on the tax rate, and I'm sorry, I have to get that, it's 236, is that number?
216,421.
216,421.
You know, if the 100,000's not used, is that also?
About 25 cents on the tax rate.
No, we gotta keep the 100 in there.
Okay, that just rolls forward to next year, okay. Okay,
Well,
so
in theory, it could make the 175, since we just put,
25 in, yeah,
could be open to for debate.
okay.
So, on the fire truck,
What was the amount, I'm sorry?
25 cents, 25 cents
25 cents on
the tax rate, which would take, all things being equal, we're at 20, what's our tax rate now? 21, 21,
I don't remember.
okay,
I'm sorry.
21 something.
Number I
So
don't
down
know.
25, so it'd be
Try not
27.
to remember.
Yeah, the reason I'm gonna take a look at that, because it could also see where we then are ranking it. It takes us down, I think, to about, I think I did this at one point, 25 cents, that's good. Okay, so that's something to think about, that we do have an effect on the tax rate, and by not taxing to the tax.
I'm sorry that I interrupted you.
That's okay.
And the fire truck would be $277 per house.
Yeah. A lot.
That's a lot if you ban it instead of.
But I really still just have trouble borrowing. Go ahead.
If we put it on the warrant as we're going to pay out of free cash for the fire truck and it doesn't pass,
You lose the money until next year.
then we lose that money till next year. What's the difference? It's $545,000 in free cash. How much is it for, if the ban, I know it gets deferred a year?
Well, we probably wouldn't have any outlay next year, and because it would take them so much time to be able to build it, and the first payment would be 2015, I think we saw
Well, no,
that.
we're gonna buy it right away. The first payment
Yes.
on the loan
We would
wouldn't be
see.
due until
20.
June of
16.
June of 16?
No,
Fiscal year 16.
Fiscal year.
June or July of 15.
No.
which is still in a year. No, June 13th, no, June 13th, yeah.
It would be June.
So
What
what
is that
that-
number? Like, how much would that, I remember you did the spreadsheet, and forgive me for, I don't
I
have
think
it
it's,
right now.
whatever,
So we're,
it's 5 years, it's
It's June of
100,000.
15, then if we decide to do this, we'd have to put a year's payment in the budget.
right, that's my question, okay. So, and how much would
For
that
a
year's
ban?
payment be?
That's what Bob's saying, June
I
of 15.
don't think so, I think.
Well, it would be, it's June
If we-
13th.
If we borrow this June 30th, wouldn't we have a
We
payment?
won't borrow till we actually get the truck. In fact, I don't think it'll be
We
the
won't
next.
borrow till we get the truck?
I don't think, yeah.
I don't, well, I know that you wouldn't make a lease payment, I don't know on the borrowing.
Theoretically, Donna could borrow whenever she wanted to.
Yeah, but
Well, she only wants to borrow in June, because she rolls everything.
almost all of our debt stuff has been no charge at all in the fiscal year for which the acquisition was made.
Okay,
Almost, I can't remember.
so probably 16 then.
Yeah.
All right, June is 16.
And that would be $105,000.
So we, 100, thank you. So like, so 100.
It's a
thinking-
5-year ban.
But we're not tying it up for a year like you would be the 545. Is that, do we
No,
don't risk that, so to speak?
no, but in next year, we'd have to put 70
Have to make
grand in
sure-
the operating budget for the next 7
Right.
years to start paying.
Yeah.
But that, and so it's that reason why, and it's that year flow on why I was entertaining, going back to the conversation you and I were having, Bob, last week was, yes, I'm a firm believer, if you have the cash, you use it, but it was that 1 year flow
Defer.
that I wanted to arbitrage it and ban some of it, so that
It's
a
not-
higher amount could go back in tax relief. And then take care of it next year. That's,
Gotta make sure we can, that's all.
Yeah. you
That's
know,
why I was thinking that.
It's like we said, let's buy a police cruiser 2 out of every 3 years, and now we're buying it 3 out of 3 years. That's just what we said when we came up with that proposal,
Well, so you raise your target.
you know. I understand that,
It's almost-
you know, an astute fiscal observer would take money now and take a stream of payments later. But I think the average person who's kind of treating the town stuff as background to living their life would be very upset to learn that we're going to give them a tax break this year, but make them pay for that tax break in each of the next 7 years. Not just making up the principal, but charging them extra for that tax break in each of the next 7
completely
years.
agree with you on
And the
that.
other thing too, we know we have some
Well, no,
expenses coming up, like, we've
don't think
done this
Charging them
OPEB.
extra.
We've deferred that a year, knowing
That's
that
what the
there's
interest
gonna be
is.
some amount next year.
Interest.
We've gotta have the money to pay for that.
Oh, the interest.
I bet you 9 out of 10 taxpayers, if
20,000.
you asked them, would take $500 in the pocket today versus paying, $100 over the next 5 years.
I'm with you on that too.
I would disagree with that, but
Yeah, I think that most of us, if we can pay cash for something, do.
I didn't think so.
Well, yeah, I
Even
mean,
though it's
I
on
don't,
somebody's
remember,
plate.
no one's.
I think
no
us on
one's-
this
has-
committee would. I think the town has taken that philosophy of let me borrow, and put
But
wants
it's
before
gotten
needs.
people, a lot of people individually into a lot of trouble, and I don't think
Exactly.
this is not a business.
Yeah, and so that's why I completely agree, Bob.
Right.
On something like that, over a 7 year, I absolutely do not like. And that's why I wouldn't even do it for all. And you're right, part of my decision last week on doing a combo was I didn't see all the cash. Now that I do, I can still make the argument on, just right here, we give 25 cents back, on the effective tax rate, and throw on another 200 on that, then it's, I'm assuming 50 cents, right? With the assumption that it's gonna go
Okay.
away next year.
So you can
That-
still do that by paying cash for the fire truck,
Mm.
giving 200,000 back to the taxpayers, and banning a bunch of other stuff on this list.
Yeah, I don't care where the ban comes.
Still the same.
Yeah, I don't care if it's
Well,
on the
what's the
fire truck
logic
or if it's
of
banned on
banning the other stuff?
3 of the other
I
things.
mean, it-
To get money back, it's
Get money
that's
back
totally
today.
the.
The total logic is exactly right, is to give money back today
I
and
mean-
defer our payments on something else that we need. Listen, if tax relief was off the table completely, I'm on the belief that if you got cash, you should spend it, not spend it. Let me say it again. If you got cash and you have a need, you should buy that need with cash, if you have the cash in the bank. No
We're
question
giving
about
some
it.
tax relief here.
No, I get it,
Yeah.
that's why I feel better, but I still think we could do more. I think that's why the tax relief and the fire truck have to be linked, and I think you need to make a decision on what you'd rather do.
Okay. When the tax bills get sent out, there will not be a note with them that says, oh, by the way,
And next year, you're gonna get screwed.
next year, yeah, we're lowering your we're not charging you for the fire truck this year, that we're gonna charge you for.
But they're not gonna, it's gonna go up 2.5% like it does every year. We're just gonna fit the payment within the 2.5 operating budget.
So,
So
so,
that it's gonna be transparent to the taxpayers, because it was gonna always go up anyway.
you know, it's
Or
gonna be
those- that's the
transparent
amount
to the
that it goes up
taxpayer if
to
you put it outside of 2.5 once
So
you
the
start
cash
it.
you have right
Or
now
we can continue.
rolls over into free cash and you have your payment, right? No?
No.
Because you're getting it back. But the other thing
Oh,
too is that
yeah.
if you have the difference between the operating budget and what you've raised for 2.5 and you're giving it back another year because it's an excess tax levy, then you're getting a,
And you might still be able to give it back next year and still pay the ban on the fire truck.
right, but anyway, I'm just not gonna borrow.
So I don't think anyone's gonna
That-
take
that
that
argument
tax
right
bill
there.
and then call up their broker and say, I've got $500 invested this way.
They might pay down their mortgage a
That's
little
a-
bit.
that's right.
And if they've got a 5% mortgage and we're paying 1% on the ban, they
They
ought to
might,
be doing that.
they might,
Knowledge
or,
of-
Or they might pay down their credit card bill
Or they
by
might just
500
put
and
the
they're
tax
paying
bill down.
19% on the credit card
but
bill.
there's no note to
paying
tell
1%.
them that's there.
But to say, listen, we can debate it, but to say they're gonna get screwed next year is wrong, because they're not gonna get screwed any more than, quote unquote, they're gonna get screwed by the 2.5 increase next year anyway.
As long as we can
As
continue to
long as
cover
we can
the.
find a room for the payment
In the
within
budget.
our means, which if this year's any indication, we just so happen to be giving back this 216. If we're in 216 next year,
You have your
then
70.
we have the 70.
We do have the 70, and,
You do
you know,
put the money-
I'd like to see that 216 be increasing in the next few years, rather than staying the same or getting smaller.
We know that there's gonna be, other, well, because that's not gonna be the good argument. Because I would say there's gonna be other capital items, but we're not, if it's gonna be,
This is
if
all.
you're using all this as operating, then it doesn't matter, yeah. Yes, David?
There was some statement about you'll get a benefit this year, but you'll get hit next year. Very roughly, if what we're talking, 100,000 a year payment on.
That's not a fine, well, I was just using a $500,000
Yeah.
borrowing,
Okay,
so.
the tax relief this year is $275 a house roughly if we ban the truck. And the following year, the tax increase is $51. So that's a nice trade-off. Now, yes, over the 7-year life or the 5-year life, you do pay it, but at 1% a year, it's just, it's crazy not to borrow money at 1% a year.
Again, I think the average person sees the town, just expects the town to run itself fiscally responsibly.
Nothing could be more fiscally
and not-
responsible
and
than
not-
borrowing at one and investing by paying down.
And not telling me that you're giving me money this year so that you can take it from me next year.
I wouldn't be
Not gonna
taking
take
it
it
and
from
telling
you
you.
next year.
I wouldn't be taking it from you next year. I would want a 1-year ban, and there's gonna be enough free cash. I don't care what gets thrown my way in terms of capital projects. I'm still gonna go look at the 5-year plan. It's a year old. We're gonna have enough.
Which we had a $500.
We're gonna have enough, and that 1-year ban gets paid off next year, and their tax.
Would you put your house on that?
Hey, how about a compromise of $550, you pay $225 free cash, and you ban $225
That's what
over
he's
7
what
years?
he's wanting to do. No, I don't know if you could do the two, oh yeah, you could. 25 over 7.
And it's kind of a
Yeah,
hybrid.
it's not an all or no, yeah.
And if
I
you're
did
in
have
a
her run those
situation
steps.
next year with 225, you could, if it was an abject failure, you could just pay off the ban early, like Bob's argued to do before.
So, 250,000 over 7 years.
I think if you don't have the discipline to use your cash this year, you're not gonna have the discipline to use your cash next year.
After all we've done in the past, you really feel that way? I mean, the way we used the.
I mean, you've got your cash here, and you don't wanna use it.
Yeah, I do. I want to give it back.
Okay. Okay?
I want to use it.
We could have given money back each of the past few years if we'd been willing to borrow more.
We didn't borrow anything last year, but
You
because we
were
used free
talking
cash.
about
That's right.
$540,000.
That's
Yeah,
all
all
this
that's trying to do this year.
But guys, every time we've talked about borrowing in the past, we've talked about it outside of 2.5. This is very, very different. It's very, very different.
I don't think it's very different.
The only thing that's similar about it is that it's debt.
Yes. To me, that's an unnecessary expense in this situation.
So, again, I recognize this is already a year old. It would be really great if capital planning could have got their stuff together and given us this. But as of last year's capital plan, FY16, there's a $40,000 outlay for replacement of portable radios, $60,000 for columns at Emerson School, $20,000 for columns at Town Hall, $30,000 for an upgrade pre-K, OT, PT
Look at
rooms
some
and lower
truck
level.
stuff.
Let's assume those are all on there. Let's assume how Harold
Is the air
says,
conditioning on there?
No.
no.
Let's
And then-
assume the air
Or-
conditioning comes back, because
Alright,
it is
so
on
the-
for next year.
All right.
And
The air conditioning is back
$200,000 for
on.
the boiler. For 2016.
And there, yeah.
Oh, good, now
And then we
got
have
the
got,
paperwork.
and then even, let's put Harold's, let's put a brand new sander.
2016, 540,000 from the schools.
Of which is air conditioning.
Yeah, 400, which is air conditioning.
200, no, it's gotta be less than that.
Why don't we just make
200.
why don't we just make a simple vote that, do we believe, as stated, that the 216,000, I'm not making the motion, but that the
Yeah.
216,421 is enough tax relief for this year? And if we have consensus or disagreement on that, then we have to move to the next step.
Okay,
I mean, I don't see any other way
Yeah,
to
it's-
make the
yeah.
impasse,
to
right?
try and get past it, okay. So,
I'm comfortable with the 216.
okay, and I don't know if we have to, do we have to vote? We can go around.
Well, we can see how close
See
it
how
is.
close.
The
Yeah,
motion.
I'm fine.
Fine with the 216 and nothing else.
Yeah.
I'm fine with the 216 and nothing else.
I would like more than the 216.
I like more than 216.
Yeah, I'd like a little bit more, but,
No,
Why
but,
do we,
just, yes.
It's just, last week I was sitting here
It doesn't
thinking,
matter, there's no
Last week,
consensus.
I have
Yeah,
to tell you, I
last
was
week-
sitting like this.
There's no
I was
consensus.
Well, if he
watching.
votes yes, it's
there's a
42.
42.
well, last,
No, but it's the same as other votes we've had
Wait a
tonight.
minute.
Not enough.
42 or 3?
1, 2, 3, 4.
I was short a lot
Yeah.
of, like,
Oh, were you?
I'm sorry, I thought.
He's the hinge, he's gotta make a
No, I
decision,
thought-
one way or
I
the
thought it
other,
was-
Brad.
Okay, I'm sorry.
216 or more.
more.
Okay.
I'm gonna stick to my conviction.
I would argue that 4 to 2 is not a consensus.
Well,
Well, it's
42 has been a,
original,
Yeah, but it's.
So, I don't know, do you go to the selectmen on Thursday and you add?
The other way
you give them-
around.
You tell them we're in an impasse and you give them 15 minutes? I have a feeling I know what they're gonna tell you. And do we let, if it's their budget, do we let them decide? I mean, I don't know, we gotta get off this impasse at some point.
yeah,
Because this is hinging on 15 other things here. Once we get consensus on this item, then the other stuff is easy.
yeah, I mean, if 216 is fine for them, then we know what to do.
They might not even like the idea of the 216,
216.
that's the thing, we don't know, we have no clue unless we present to them our rationale and our thinking, which I think we can do Thursday night, but they already have a pretty full agenda. I'm not sure they're gonna be able to stew over this, maybe someone can get to Dawn tomorrow and tell them what we're chewing on and what we're having a problem deciding. But as we've learned from other things, lack of consensus for an idea is a no vote, right? But I don't know if we, the way that it was presented was, is 216 enough? And we didn't have consensus. We're
No.
good with 216, and there was a no vote that we're good with 216, essentially at 3-3, which doesn't really tell us anything. I don't know. I don't know what to do.
What about having the selectmen in next week?
I think,
It's kind of late,
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
but we could.
Well, because you're not gonna be able to
Unfortunately,
be
I'm not
there.
going to be here, but
Okay. Right.
that's fine.
I don't know, I just was throwing it out there because it makes.
We could, because
there's
it
a
takes
lot.
it off their agenda, and the budget's technically not done, and we have no reason to be done
We still have 2 more
next week.
weeks,
We
yeah.
still have 2 more weeks.
we should be further along than we are today. But
But I don't know if we've had this, this kind of really,
we're wrestling a new topic to the ground.
Right.
I think that from what I've heard from Dawn, and David would discredit it because it wasn't in sort of the proper forum, but I believe the message that I've kind of pieced together is that the selectmen are more of the belief that if we have the cash, we should not borrow for it under any circumstance.
that's what I.
Now,
Now, who's that?
No, it's just sort of
Got that sort of
idea,
Dawn as their
understanding.
preference. Now, maybe we haven't had a chance to pitch them on alternatives.
Well,
Maybe
that's
they
right.
haven't.
They don't, it could be
Haven't
more of a
gotten there.
tax relief.
We had that whole placeholder article for tax relief that they promptly took off because they realized advisory hadn't had consensus on it. But they did have a chance to comment on the viability of that article, and I don't believe there was particular support for it. But all these things are anecdotal until you basically poll the three of them and you say,
This is,
what would you like to
Well,
bring?
I know it would have to come up, it would almost have to come up at
They're not
meeting
gonna vote-
Thursday.
They're not gonna vote Article 2 Thursday.
No, but what about all the other money articles that would be dependent on
They didn't
how...
ask us what our, yep. that's
Yeah,
true.
so I think it almost has to come up as a part of a discussion.
Here's the problem you have, is that I'm looking for the fire truck article. It is,
Number 28 on page 18.
all right, the article is, if you're gonna borrow for that, the article would have to be rewritten.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, that I think it has to be,
So if the selectmen approve it as written, then they've told us they want to pay cash for it.
That's right.
So we
So-
don't have any real decision point after that.
but if we don't bring up any point about the discussion,
Well, which we would, if
Yeah.
those of us that are there Thursday to say, hey, we are exploring the idea of a ban, we kind of split on it, and then say, well, why would you do a ban if you had the money? And we then have to say, well, we take the money and apply it to some sort of tax relief, and then that takes their temperature right on the spot. It may steer that into another half an hour discussion, which they might not want to do.
yeah, but I have the feeling that they're wanting to vote, so I think we have to bring it up on Thursday.
I mean, I feel like we really should come up with our own thing, but it's tough to come up with our own thing if we're 3-3. so.
Yeah. Which I'm sure is going to be their question, where does everybody stand, and we're 3-3.
So let's just be clear on what we're 3-3 on. We're 3-3 split that the 216, we all agree the 216 is a good idea.
Right,
We're split on 3-3 that we should go farther than the 216,
that's
correct?
my
I would be
understanding.
more specific, that we're split 3-3 on whether or not we should borrow to go farther on that.
Yeah, because
For
that's the only
example-
way that we can get.
For example,
No, well,
if the fire station gets turned down, I have no problem taking that cash and applying it to tax relief.
mhm.
If the
No,
fire,
wait,
the
no,
28,000.
we needed that 28,000 to be able to cover everything here.
But said another way, then kind of what we're saying is that we're all kind of okay with everything on this list then too, though, right? Even though we haven't voted for it.
I mean, we voted against the vault, but we have to fund it.
yeah, I don't want,
So, yeah, we're
Yeah,
for it because
I
we have
say,
to fund it. but-
In my case, with the exception of the fire station, I agree with you. that-
And the vault.
I'm, and the vault, which,
And I'd have to say, I'm in the same boat as that.
I am too. Everybody,
Including the cameras, the whole amount of the cameras for town hall and library.
yeah.
I don't really, the 10,370, can't make them spend it, and I don't really care to have a
We need
separate
those,
article
we
for
need
it.
those cameras.
Yeah.
I agree.
yeah, no, we need the cameras, but I think that they should, I mean, if they have the money, they should spend it, but we'll find out.
Yeah,
I think they should spend it as well.
I'm agree, yeah, 28 on the fire station, that can go away. And the cameras, yeah, I would still like a number from the trustees. I'd really like for them to
Well, I'll
throw
get an
some
email
money
to you.
towards
Yeah,
those.
I'll get an
They don't
email
have-
to you tomorrow.
Sounds though it's not, wouldn't be all 10,370, but
All
a
right,
little
so-
juice that way would be
So
a nice
can
offering.
I say it a different way? We have, I'm just throwing this out there, we have consensus on all of the spending, on the viability of all the spending articles, with the exception of the fire station and the vault.
Well, we have consensus on the vault, we just
Yeah, right.
disapprove
Divide,
it.
yeah.
We have enough cash to do all of them. Where we don't have consensus and where we're split, it hinges on whether we apply, whether we pay the fire truck in cash or whether we ban the fire truck and take any proceeds, even if it's a split ban of cash and ban or all ban or no, you know what I mean? We take whatever the savings of a ban, any application of a ban to the fire truck to free cash or to tax relief, we're split
Yeah.
on that.
But I might go so far as to say, my desire to go to a ban, I'm looking at a 1-year ban. That's it.
They're all one-year bans.
So,
No, but he's paying,
But
not
I'm-
extending it
Pay
to
it off.
7 years.
I'm not
have
looking to go
anything
anything
after.
past.
When's your term up on this committee?
I want to get off to understand what that does for us.
No, I mean, I don't mean it.
Your position.
Yeah, I don't get it. Why either?
Because of the,
What does it do?
we're
for us?
He's not gonna pay any interest, is basically what it comes down to.
Who wants to
Right,
float the
right.
free year?
Yeah.
Right.
But then it's gonna come
But
back.
then it's gonna come back.
Really bad
Then you
for us
need,
next
you
year.
need,
You
you
still
need
need it.
$450,000, or you need $550,000 in a year's time. Where are you gonna get that if you're gonna give that away
because
as
I'm
tax
not
relief?
gonna ban the whole thing.
No,
It's
you
Oh, you're gonna
just-
split
He's
it.
taking it at like,
So
a- yeah.
so he's gonna say it's a
Yeah.
time.
I see the logic.
250, and then I,
250, you need 250 in the next budget cycle to pay off the ban. Where is it?
yeah, because there's no way even with the $400,000 AC, there's no way we would agree to pay for that for cash. So we'll have the
That's-
250 next
Clearly
year.
not raising this, but where do you get the 250?
So you think free cash is gonna replenish the 500 again, and the free cash target will be 250, we'll have 250 to apply to pay off the ban?
That means that we won't be able to do,
All right.
you won't have any free cash to do any other capital. items.
There's not that many capital items next year. Because there's no way in hell we're gonna say yes to a $400,000 AC.
There's,
You know, you may not say that, but it may get on the warrant.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
And it may
But what-
pass too.
But that was the,
That's
when I made,
Outside of 2.5 though, which, you know?
but when I made the decision to pay that off,
Yeah.
I am not, to Bob's, I am not artificially, giving them a tax break with Bob's note in the tax bill and then taking it away from next year. They would be taken away from themselves next year, not me.
No. They just did the numbers. It's-
Yeah, no, what he's saying is they would have to, if they want
They-
I
to see, they
understand that
want to raise their
they
taxes.
will raise their own taxes, but he's not doing it by doing the ban, but
No.
it's not, it's still, to me, fiscally responsible to do a ban. You guys see it different way.
okay, last comment then.
When you're talking about little things you might add to the 216, I'd like to suggest you add the 30,008 for the vault study, because I think the odds of it passing with your unanimous disapproval are low. And even on the very outside chance it did pass, it's not a disaster if your 250 of free cash goes to 220. I mean, you were just saying essentially
Yeah, but
that, yeah.
Yeah, we don't know, it's,
So why don't you...
Everything has to go
Why don't
right.
you add that 30,800 to the 216, or whatever that number has gotten to?
How would we add it? We'd have,
Just assume that it doesn't pass.
I understand, that we had to encumber free cash for it in the likely event, in the unlikely
Yeah.
event that it passes.
That-
but
that's
then
what
we
you're
wanna-
doing right now.
We don't want to delay the use of it this year.
Yeah.
I would.
It's $30,000. I mean, doesn't change the movement. I know you're going to tell me it's
Do you want the
16 cents
per
an
house
hour.
amount on that?
half of one, okay.
I think we're getting cute if we.
Yeah,
All right.
I think so too.
Um,
Okay, so,
I would like to address another topic unrelated to all of this tonight.
$15 a house.
Thank you.
And that is
You said 60.
the Council on Aging discussion that was held last week.
Oh, I have a, yes, I wasn't here, and I do have an opinion too.
There was a statement made, we had a discussion, and we had a straw poll, and I asked for more discussion, I was told no, because there's a vote. And there was never any announcement of the vote being taken. The announcement that the vote had occurred after the straw poll. So there was no vote on that topic last week. It's still open for discussion.
Okay. I'd have to go back and look at it, because certainly wasn't my intention to do something that...
Nobody made a motion.
And then it just felt, I can tell you,
Nobody-
watching it,
Do we vote?
it just fell off. Nobody
Well, it was...
seconded
we did-
anything.
Oh, it was a
and
straw
nobody-
poll.
There was no
Yeah.
But does it
motion.
have to be,
Nothing.
well, let me just ask a question.
like
On
the
every budget
conversation
item,
is-
we don't take a vote necessarily. So,
Typically on budget items that are contentious, like we just voted today. or-
Yeah, I know we're voting a bunch of-
you know,
yeah, a bunch of
We did a
stuff.
vote, we technically would do a vote.
okay.
You know,
Well, yeah, you know,
if you look at that, there was a question afterwards about, do we need to vote on some warrant article or some wording on a warrant article? And I'm the one that made the comment that said, no, we don't, because we have a consensus, because there was agreement around the table. But as I said a little while ago, on, you know, where it's 4-2, in my opinion, that's not consensus, it's a
I don't know
majority,
whether it is.
given this.
Yeah.
Right? So a consensus is, there's really not much controversy on it. I think the topic of the Council on Aging position of program director is unresolved. I'd like to see it taken out of the budget. I don't know if the committee would like to address this tonight, or, you know, we're going to be short members in the next week.
I have changed my feeling about that. When I look at the salary of the director, I'm sorry, you have to hear me out.
I know, yeah.
And I would like somehow if, to figure out exactly what the duties are of that person. Not that I can figure out how many hours those things take up, or she devotes to those things, but I don't know, I just had that gut feeling that, you know, for that kind of money, I don't think we need a program director. I think that it might be able to fall under the hood of Sheila's job.
So there's, you know,
Just how I feel.
if you want, I mean, if you want to have a vote, I'd have to find out if, I don't know, guys. If you said that we did something wrong in the way that the meeting was run, then I will accept that and we'll do it the way that it should be done. I don't think we need any more discussion on this, only because everybody knows where everybody's position is. So if you want to make a motion, if you think that, and then we can look at it later, because I don't know if it was wrong, right, or indifferent. I don't,
Well,
you know.
I think the question is whether I think I can say for sure, thinking back to last week, we did not vote.
No, we did not vote, I know that. And I didn't think it
We
would,
didn't vote the week before when we were split.
yeah,
We decided to
delay it.
delay it, and then Connie wasn't here, and we talked about it last week and took another, I guess, I don't know if you call it a poll or a consensus or whatever. We had a different consensus, and then we ended it. But I think we showed tonight, on things that we're wrestling with, we have a formal vote for the minutes, and I guess that's your point, right, is that we didn't formally vote. I can attest to that, we know we didn't.
I know we didn't vote, but I didn't think it was necessary, because we don't vote on other items, but, and I don't know what the term consensus means versus, you know, if it's 4-2 or 3-2
Well,
or,
the only thing that we ever do that means
100%.
anything is a vote.
right, well,
And I
we
have
don't
to tell you,
vote on
watching
budgets.
that change come on.
Well, then do it, I mean, I'm one person on the committee, so you do whatever you think is proper, and I'll vote my vote.
But here's the thing, if the motion is to take it out of the budget and we have a split vote, then
It's a no.
it's a no. But the discussion was always, should we have it in the budget?
Well, but then you can direct make the motion the way you want to make it so that it would work.
As, you know, my question to the committee right now is, do we want to do something now? I'll make a motion if generally we want to do something now, or do we want to put this off?
I'm fine to vote the way that I.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, given the fact that we're all here, I think
Yeah.
it's probably important
Okay.
that we do it now.
So I will, because we're discussing a change to the budget from prior years, I am going to make a motion in favor of establishing the position. I will then also vote against the motion I'm making. So I vote, I move that we add the position of program director to the Council on Aging budget for fiscal 15.
Is there a
You made the
second?
motion to add.
Yes.
Right, so I'll second the ad, but I will also vote against it because that was my position on it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No?
Nay.
Aye.
Okay. So it's a tie, 3-3, so that means it does not pass. And on that, I would suggest that I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.